call. Good.
Thank you. Chair Moore.
Here.
Board Member Cunningham.
Here.
Board Member Olson.
Here.
Board Member Inswa.
Here.
And Board Members Six and Watkins are absent.
Okay, thank you. We are going to move on to public comment. Any member of the public may address the board for up to 2 minutes on any subject within our jurisdiction that is not scheduled on this agenda for public discussion. We currently have one slip for public comment. Rick Clausen, would you like to come up? I just have one. So if have you submitted one? Oh, is there another one? At any rate, sorry.
That's okay.
2 minutes, please.
Timer going?
It is now going.
All right, thanks. I always like to speak ahead of Anne Marie. You see a lot of me. And because there are a lot of balls in the air with design review now and the incoming state mandates beginning the first of the year on what can and can't be done, I've given a lot of thought to what it is that I think is important as a member of the public and as a sometimes frequent complainant here at this microphone. And I think I've distilled it down for myself, and I mentioned this to City Council last Tuesday. And I would ask that you consider this perhaps the most important point that you deal with, and I know that you deal with a lot, and I don't diminish that at all. But I think compatibility, building compatibility with the existing neighborhoods in all of their aspects, whether that be height or mass, bulk, and scale, or architectural details, or parking allotments and whatnot. Just it all falls under compatibility. When it comes to design, we have an admittedly historic Hispanic flavor to our town, and I think that that's a design that will fly anywhere. What I don't like to see personally are architects that want to make a statement and bring in designs that make a statement, or bring in designs that I could mimic, as I have joked with you before, by constructing them from Duplos.
Okay, that is 2 minutes. Thank you. And next we have Anna Marie Gott. You have 2 minutes.
Good afternoon, board members. I want to remind you about a few things. First of all, tomorrow is Election Day, and District 1, our current council member, Jason Dominguez, is running. And if anyone lives in District 1, I urge you to actually vote for him. I think he is one of the best council people that we have. But on to other things. I really want to talk today about your written documentation that you are receiving from staff. We are not seeing what the actual requirements are, and I think that's imperative for you to be able to make a decision. If someone says proposed, that does not mean required. What you need to actually see is the ordinance itself if you are not going to open up our Chapter 30 or Chapter 22 and find the ordinance yourself. What we've got right now are individuals that are proposing parking as an example, but it's not necessarily meeting the requirements. And if you approve a landscape design for a parking lot without that required parking, no one else is going to require that they provide parking. I think it's very important that we're honest, not only with our written reports, but what is actually on the design files. The next thing I wanted to bring to your attention is I've recently found out that 18 Anacapa was approved by a staff member to have substantial changes to the landscape. If you actually went and looked at the landscape before the sale of the building, it was lush. It had been there for about 30 years, and there were tons of trees. After the sale of the property, basically everything was ripped out. Someone came, showed some photos of a planter, and said, "We want to enhance the landscaping." There's a huge difference between plants that had been there for 30 to 40 years and what is there now. If you drive by, you will see a barren lot, and we need to get an enforcement case, and it needs to come back here for your review and approval. Thank you.
Would anyone else like to address the board with public comment? Seeing no one, we'll close public comment and move on to review of the minutes. Actually, I'm going to reopen public comment and just, I want to acknowledge that we have received several letters from the public, and also another document from Richard Clausen regarding the AUD amendments, etc. So thank you for sending those, and I will close general public comment.
We're talking about the AUD later. So.
Yeah. Okay. So we'll close public comment and move on to review of the minutes for October 21st.
I'll move that we approve the minutes.
Second.
Okay, is there any discussion?
No discussion.
No discussion. I didn't see anything either in there. So we have a first and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Motion carries. Then consent minutes for the 28th.
Mr. Chair, the Architectural Board of Review consent agenda for her minutes for October 28th, 2019. Item A, 819 Reddick, was given approval of its review after final with conditions. Item B, 331 East Valero Street, was continued indefinitely with comments. Item C, 420 East Korea Street, was given project design and final approval with conditions.
Okay.
I'll move that we approve the minutes.
Second.
Any discussion on those minutes?
No discussion.
Okay, first and second, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. And for November 4th.
Mr. Chair, for the Architectural Board of Review, November 4th minutes. My apologies, Mr. Chair. Do we have that doc? Found it. All right. Item A, 119 Harbor Way, was given project design approval and final approval as submitted. Item B, 536 West Gutierrez Street, was given project design and final approval. Oh, sorry, no, it was continued indefinitely with comments. Item C, 708 North Aliso Street, was postponed indefinitely for renoticing. Item D, 2034 Cliff Drive, was continued indefinitely with comments. And 111 West Mitchell Terrena Street was continued indefinitely with comments.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, I'll move that we approve the minutes with the, not exception, but condition that it be noted that I was absent for item A and item D. I don't see that on the minutes.
Okay.
Second.
Okay, we have any discussion?
No discussion.
First and a second, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, any announcements?
Mr. Chair, staff has 5 announcements today. Item 4, 219 South Milpas Street will not have a quorum and will be postponed to the November 18th agenda. The Olive Mill Roundabout reviews will be scheduled for the November 18th agenda as well. Board Member Cunningham will be stepping down from items 3 and 4. That's 219 East Haley and 29 South Milpas, which is postponed. Board Member 6 will be absent from today's meeting, and Board Member Watkins will be joining us for item 3, 219 East Haley.
Okay, thank you. Any subcommittee reports?
None disease, 18th of November, new roundabout.
Got it. Right. Okay. Then we can move on to our discussion item, which is on the average unit density incentive program. Staff report.
Good afternoon, Chair Moore, ABR members. My name is Dan Gullett, Principal Planner in Long Range Planning. Today, we are here to get your feedback on pending AUD amendments. So we're just in the beginning phases of the process of amending the AUD program before the trial period ends. The trial period would either end late next year or in August of 2021 at the latest. So we're seeking your board's feedback on these potential amendments. The Planning Commission has reviewed potential amendments in October at 2 hearings and has recommended direction to City Council. So there's a joint meeting between the Planning Commission and City Council on November 14th where that recommended direction will be presented. Staff will also be conveying feedback from ABR. We did go to HLC next week, and we're going back to HLC on the 13th, so we'll have information from HLC as well. At that hearing, we are wanting direction from City Council on how to proceed with amendments. So we haven't drafted ordinances or anything yet. We're just wanting to be sure we're within the guideposts, and following that hearing, we will be going to boards and commissions and getting feedback from the public on what's being proposed as well. So our goals for amending the program, these are in order of number of characters. The first is to remove barriers to facilitate development of new housing in the city. Also increase predictability in process and regulations, protect existing affordable housing, promote downtown revitalization, limit on-street parking demand, retain community character, accommodate smaller units, protect historic resources, and focus growth. So just a little policy background. In 2011, a vision for the general plan was adopted. That vision was to allow as much housing as possible within resource limits to provide an array of lifestyle options for a demographically and economically diverse resident population. And the AUD program implemented a portion of that vision. More specifically, the land use element has a policy that says to encourage rental housing close to transit and easy walking and or biking distance to commercial services and recreational opportunities. So the AUD program was designed to encourage new housing, and it does that by allowing for increased densities. They're currently based on average unit size. The AUD program allows up to 2.7 times the density you could get prior to the AUD program. It also incentivizes new housing by reducing parking requirements, setback requirements, and open space standards. So it was adopted in 2013. Again, it was adopted for this initial trial period. So the trial period, there's 2 different triggers that end the trial period. It's either 8 years. The 8 years would end in August of 2021, or when 250 qualifying units get certificate of occupancy, and that we expect to happen toward the end of next year. So we're specifically seeking feedback from your board on 2 areas. The first is regulating building size, and the second is decision-making on these projects. So regarding building size, the proposal is to move away from regulating housing by density, and then instead limiting building size based on lot area. So it would, right now we have density-based regulations. And the reasons are to protect community character, better set community expectations, provide for a more predictable design review process. You would know the maximum size of your building going into the design review process. This would also allow for additional smaller units. Right now, the biggest building you can get in priority housing overlay has an average unit size of 811 square feet. And once you get to smaller units below 811, the building essentially gets smaller. So we're wanting to encourage more smaller units, especially in the downtown. And then these regulations we're looking at would also facilitate reuse of existing space, conversion from non-residential to residential. So we currently do regulate building size for single-family development, and that seems to have been working well. So there is a FAR standard for single-family now. The AUD program we have today is loosely based on building size, but all that's regulated is the floor area of the inside of the units. It excludes common spaces, circulation, parking garages, and commercial. So it doesn't actually limit the building size, just the inside of the units. So if we establish these building size regulations, it would be by floor to lot area ratio. And we would want to establish those based on broad community input and especially input from ABR and HLC. We would still want to limit the maximum average unit size. We don't want to go back to the previous program, which was called variable density, where we were seeing very, very large units. We want units that are geared toward the city's workforce specifically. And with FAR standards, we can incorporate facilitating affordable housing and protecting historic resources and creek habitat areas. So regarding building size, there was a recommended mitigation measure that was adopted with the city's general plan in 2011. So that mitigation measure was called VIS 2, but it did call for FARs to be developed with attention to protect historic resources, maintaining Santa Barbara's small town character, and encouraging small affordable units. And it said the FARs should be more restrictive to protect historic structures and adjacent areas to historic structures, and that we should consider higher FARs for multifamily rental projects and small affordable residential units. So we have two examples of projects that aren't allowed by right under the current standards that could be with FAR standards. And the reason is these two projects have more density than is allowed currently. So the maximum density allowed in the city is 63 dwelling units an acre. So these two projects are downtown. This first one is El Carrillo. It's a housing authority project, 315 West Carrillo. So there's 61 studios. These are small studios, 216 square feet. Our code allows for small units. You can do, so there's special consideration for affordable units. These are affordable units, but even for non-affordable units, it can be as small as 220 square feet. So the density of this project is 124 units per acre, so it's about twice as what you could get with the current density standards. So currently 31 units would be allowed where there's 61 with a project. And again, we're showing these two projects because we feel what matters for the community is more the size of these buildings rather than the density of the building. So we're trying to do two things. We're trying to get more units and protect community character, set expectations, and get the sizes of buildings that we want from the get-go. So this other example is, it's called the Arlington Building, 125 West Anapamu. This is Sanctuary Centers. This is an older apartment building. There's 28 units here. It's a really small lot. The density is 233 units an acre, significantly more than what you could get today. 7 units would be allowed by the current standards. So the other topic we're looking for feedback on is decision-making on these projects. So the proposal is to make Planning Commission an additional review authority. The ABR and HLC's roles would continue as is. So there are projects that go to Planning Commission for comments only, and these are projects on these larger lots, 15,000 square feet or greater lots. That process was intended to streamline, or having projects just go to Planning Commission for comments was intended to streamline the process, but it really hasn't. This is an additional hearing. There's lead time for a staff report and staff work going into it, The Planning Commission was established to weigh in on land use issues and review projects. The Planning Commission gets staff reports. There's staff assigned to these projects. The Planning Commission also adds robust conditions to projects that can address community concerns. And we do feel it's the best forum for the public to address land use issues. There is new state legislation that was passed last month that is limiting the number of public hearings for discretionary projects. This is something that we're going to start to be grappling with. It's effective in January. So what this does is limits those hearings to 5. So that would include the Planning Commission hearing. So as it stands right now, these hearings that are comments only from the Planning Commission would count against those 5. And then the other 4 would be ABR, HLC, so it doesn't count appeals. So those are the 2 items we're specifically asking for feedback on. I did send the Planning Commission staff report to the board last week. We welcome comments on any other items on there as well. Thank you.
Okay. So we will need to open it for public comment. We have one speaker slip. Anybody else here?
Yes.
Interested? Okay. Anna Marie, Scott, come on up. Yeah, 2 minutes.
Good afternoon. So let's talk about open space. You saw that building on Anacapa. There is no open space, and we need it. You can't just put people in a box and expect them to be happy, and our open space is disappearing. So that is absolutely something that I would recommend that you comment on. Regarding, decision-making authority, your charter, which people had to vote on to actually have it implemented, gives you the sole ability for size, bulk, scale, massing, architecture. You cannot garner this community support at the very first meeting. And you would have to actually have a vote of the people in November of next year to actually change the charter so that Planning Commission could make other decisions. My recommendation is that you start getting staff reports because you are not getting the truth about these projects. Throughout your review, you are being led down a merry path to approve projects that cannot and should not be approved based upon our ordinances. It's very simple. You don't get the information that you need to make decisions, and you are lied to, period. That's all I'm going to say about it. You need to require that a staff report is presented to you at the very first meeting. It outlines, is it compatible, is it not? Show it on a map. Tell us how it meets the ordinance and how it does not. Let the community in for the first 2 meetings or maybe even 3, and then have it go to a joint meeting. That is where Planning Commission and you should be making a decision. If you can't have all people at the table, have a committee of 4 members from ABR and 4 members from Planning Commission. You're going to make a better decision. There is not one person on the Planning Commission that's an architect.
Thank you.
May I say one more thing?
Very briefly.
The last thing I was going to say is that, commercial. We've got proposals to have commercial on the top of residential buildings. In many cases, that might be incompatible if you sandwich commercial, residential, commercial, because of noise and everything else. So I would urge you to make a recommendation that we only have residential above. Thank you.
All right, and Rick Clausen? 2 minutes.
Thank you. Today it happens that I am wearing a hat, and I'll take a moment to tip it to Mr. Gullett for his presentation. I note with pleasure that slides 4, 10, and 11 mention historic resources as being on the agenda to be protected, acknowledged, and protected. I just want to say about the recommendations that when you have a trial period, and we've been through a trial period for the AUD, usually it's used to work out the kinks in a program, to realize the unexpected consequences of it, to focus on the successes that you can learn, and identify problems for correction. I think that one of the successes of the current AUD trial program was that developers loved it. Despite their initial trepidation, or everyone's initial trepidation, that projects might not pencil out. They've been penciling out like crazy. One of the problems for correction is, I think, that there was a well-intended conception at the planning table that affordable by design would put some limits on these projects. And that was entirely corrupted by some developers who made smaller units that did not become affordable, and that's a problem. And I'm hoping that the FAR regulations are going to address that so that we actually do get smaller units that will drive market prices down. I look for staff assessments of those successes and the failures of the trial period to be outlined and identified when they make recommendations, formal recommendations to council and planning commissions and the public comment periods in the future. Thank you.
Okay. All right, would anyone else like to address the board topic? Seeing no one, we did have some public comment emailed in, Richard Clausen, as well as information from Sally Spar. Thank you very much for that. And we will close public comment and move on to, I guess, should we start with questions, or we just go straight to comments?
Questions first would maybe be best.
Okay. Why don't we start down there with Leon?
First question is on the small units, 216 square foot units. Have we seen any outlines of what might be included in 216 square feet? Because when I kind of think about it, I imagine a bedroom of, say, 10 by 12, which might include a closet, is 120 square feet, and maybe a bathroom that's 5 by 9 or 10, which would be 50, which leaves like 40 square feet for living, kitchen, and that sort of thing. So it seems pretty tough to do that.
So how these are being referred to as micro units, and there was a study of downtown recently. There was a presentation on it to council in July from Cosmont, and they were saying that Santa Barbara is essentially ripe for this development. There's demand there, an opportunity downtown for these smaller units. So they are designed for single occupancy, and it is studio. So it's an open room with a bathroom. A lot of times it's custom furniture in there that's built in just to maximize storage and space in these units. But they are smaller, and our intention isn't just to get those units. We still want a mix of unit types, and we want to adjust the regulations so that we see that. But we do want to also better accommodate these smaller units so it's possible for them to be built.
I'm familiar with these kind of units, quite familiar with them. I own some in Nebraska. And the smallest ones we have in an 80-unit building are 320 square feet. And I have owned those for 30 years, and they are successful. But they're a minimum size. And it's really hard to get 2 people even in those units of that size. So I question that very low size. And the way that I might be help me with that is if we began to see some actual diagrams of how they might lay out. My second question is about staff reports. And I'm not quite sure whether this is the time to discuss whether or not staff reports should enter into this picture or not. So that's my first question. Is this the appropriate time to talk about staff reports?
I'd say where that's related is with the decision making. So if these larger projects are getting an additional required approval from Planning Commission, then there are formal staff reports that the Planning Commission sees. We're not proposing to change the design review process to do staff reports right now, but what's being proposed is to have the design board focused on aesthetics entirely and not on those other neighborhood issues, and that all of the zoning and other requirements are clearly spelled out for the Planning Commission. The SB 330 limiting the number of hearings that these projects get between the Planning Commission and the design boards will likely change our process, where we have more refined plans that you see. It wouldn't be the super conceptual plans at the beginning, because we can't afford to lose an opportunity for review. So I think that will change that way too.
The last question I have is about parking. So on the most dense example, which I think was 126 units an acre, so what would be the parking requirements under that condition?
So the proposal to Planning Commission that Planning Commission is taking forward to City Council on November 14th is to allow for parking in lieu fees in the central business district, so the downtown area. So right now the requirement is 1 space per unit. Generally, the larger 3-bedroom units outside of downtown require more. But an in lieu fee would allow a developer to buy down the parking requirement, and those fees would be used to improve different kinds of access to and within downtown. But with a parking in lieu fee, you could buy down your requirement to 0 potentially. So that relates to your point on the smaller, like, single occupant units. Like, we know these aren't for everybody. There's families that want yards. We have various housing products here. Our policies say we should be providing a variety of housing. We're not providing these small units now. We think there is a demand, younger people and older people alike, to live in these units. And the idea with the in lieu parking fee is vehicle ownership is a choice downtown. Like, there are people who work downtown that could live downtown and not need to own a vehicle downtown.
The projects that we've seen come before us, it seems like when we hear the public speak, one of the largest issues is the parking is already a problem in their neighborhoods, and that this continues to increase that problem. So it becomes an interest of mine and a concern.
Right. So there are a couple of related things to that. One is these new projects, we would be looking to prohibit tenants from participating in the residential permit parking program. So there are blocks downtown where you need a sticker on your car to park there. And again, this would be you'd be going in eyes wide open to these units. It's going to be really hard to park. So it would be a choice, and developers may not be interested in that. Like lenders may not be interested in that, but it would be an opportunity to provide units without parking potentially.
Thank you.
Well, we're design review board, right? So I'm challenged. I am extremely challenged to keep my lane on design review, because we have nothing to see to design review, right? We have nothing to see to weigh upon in design review. But what I'm hearing as a homeowner here, I'm not pleased. So I want to keep my comments to design review, but I can't. I have no comments on design review because what you're proposing has nothing to do with design review. It becomes occupancy and usage and density and traffic and parking. And I have a lot of thoughts about that. I'm not a fan of making a big change to a design direction of what we want on the main corridor to introduce low-income housing, high density, no parking, believing that people who live in these communities don't need a car. People don't just walk up and down the street. They have to go to their doctors. They have to go to Goleta. They have to go into the community in some sort of vehicle. And to think that just because it's a good idea to encourage high density without the proper steps to ensure that it's successful challenges me. I would love to see the planning department give us examples of other communities that have proposed such a direction that have been successful in writing. Here is what community in the past have had the same challenges that we have had, and here is how they have successfully navigated those challenges, and here are the results. We don't have to reinvent the wheel, but I'd love to see, and again, this is design review, but I would love to see examples, physical examples of other communities that have tried to do a paradigm shift that have been successful. Excuse me, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you.
I don't have a lot of questions, but I have heard that there was discussion regarding the initial review meeting being a joint meeting with ABR or HLC and Planning Commission, just in order to supposedly advance the review process, get better feedback to applicants early on during the first meeting, rather than simply having it a PC review and then progress on to HLC or ABR. Is that under discussion?
That's been brought up. The way staff was conceptualizing it would be the same process as it is now. So these projects go before the design boards, maybe one concept review, and then go to the planning commission. We'd love to hear your feedback on that.
I'm not sure I have any more other than just what I mentioned. It seems, I know we're going to be under a lot of pressure to get things done in 5 meetings. And on that line, I'm also on the Street Tree Advisory Committee for the Planning or Park and Recreation Commission, and we have authority over, the Parks and Recreation Commission has authority over setback trees. The This doesn't apply to ABR as often as it does to single-family design board, but it does occasionally. So that means that an applicant has a Parks and Recreation Commission meeting inserted into the process. So that, presumably takes one of those 5 meetings out of the PC ABR continuum and takes a meeting away from ABR, basically. Is that your understanding of this? Is there any way around that? How do we deal with that?
I haven't considered that. I think it would be, because it's 5 public hearings, and this is state law that we're having to deal with. So the way we set up our rules didn't anticipate this. So it may be that we need to change the city's rules somehow on that.
Okay. Any idea how the city's rules would be changed?
I would think that would count as one of the 5 hearings.
Yeah. Okay. I think I like what I've seen with regard to floor area ratios. I don't have any philosophical objection to limiting the amount of parking that people can have or restricting, their options to no parking as long as they're going into it eyes wide open. I think that happens to be life today. So I have no objection to those. I think, obviously our charge is architectural review, design review. We're not that concerned with the other issues, but philosophically, I think you're on the right track with, where you're going. Thank you.
A couple of questions. So, and it seems like with all of these state laws coming down the pipeline, the conceptual review is really going to be limited to the appearance of the building, most likely. Massing is really going to be difficult for us to make comments about. So it seems like the concept review is almost a formality in some ways, particularly if it's in the downtown corridor, if it's coming in and it's a Mediterranean Santa Barbara style, it seems like it's already ticking the boxes. We can't do a whole lot to change the mass of a building. Is there any mechanism to control the mix of unit types, at least, in these amendments? Like there needs to be a certain number of small units, because if you go to FAR, there's do as many units as you can get in there, but there's going to be a point in that pro forma where it doesn't make sense to do all 200 square foot units. There's going to be a point where maybe it's 2-bedroom units are more desirable for a developer.
Yeah, so what's being proposed now is, so you'd have a maximum building size, and that building size includes any commercial you want to provide, parking podium. There'd be a maximum average unit size like we have now. So you could provide any kind of mix that meets that. Staff was proposing to require a mix of units in each project to get
A ratio of
two or more bedroom units to get those.
Okay.
Talking to developers, we've heard that the market would likely build smaller units. So we do want to look at regulation to get a mix of units out of this program moving forward. The Planning Commission didn't like requiring a minimum percentage of 2 or more bedroom units project by project, and wanted us to explore other ways of getting that mix.
Okay. And then what would count towards the FAR then? It's interior area, roofed area, or is it?
We would be looking at interior building area. So either full gross building, or there could be consideration of netting some of it out. But what we're wanting to regulate is what you see.
So any like interior corridors,
Right.
all of that would be included in that. And how would that be, if you're coming up with numbers like maximum FARs, how would that be determined?
A robust community conversation. So we've started talking with AIA about it, and they're thinking about it. We know there's sensitivities around potential historic districts and areas where there are a lot of historic structures. So the nice thing about this tool is it can be tailored to those areas. The devil will be in the details, like what those numbers ultimately be.
So thinking we take example buildings that are already in the community and analyze those? And,
Yes.
okay. Then the issues like common open space and private open space, those in the staff report, it was recommended those be reduced. Is there a number or a?
Yeah, so the Planning Commission's recommended direction is to have no open space requirements only for those blocks along State Street in the Central Business District. So the blocks between Anacapa and Chapala Street, and go down to no open space there, but retain the existing open space requirements elsewhere.
So from Anacapa to Chapala, like the center line of those streets, or from on the interior State Street of that?
Including the entire block. So,
Entire block,
so
okay.
yeah, from those streets, interior to State Street.
Okay. All right. Those are my.
I have another question.
Yeah.
How is how are the tall buildings that we're going to be dealing with going to work with the solar access requirements? Because we're going to be looking at new buildings that may be potentially 4 stories tall that will be, let's see, the first one on the block is,
It's all commercial area, so there's no.
oh, this is all commercial area. No multifamily.
Right. So we did hear some concerns going into Planning Commission. So the proposal was to allow for larger buildings up State Street to Mission Street. So that's all HLC's jurisdiction. But on the east side of State Street, up toward Mission, it's single family zoning. So there was want of special treatment of the edge condition there and some kind of solar access setback requirement may be the right tool to do that.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Chair, if I may help with also in terms of at least coming up with comments for this, recognize that for some projects, state law is really, and it has been doing it for the last few years, streamlining everything, right? Streamlining the review process. So for certain projects, you may have only 5 hearings or 4, even depending on the project. So recognize that your board still will always retain jurisdiction and control in terms of building permits dealing with exterior and design reviews. And so the task is, how are we able to do that at the same time leaving under the charter the Planning Commission dealing with land use issues? So what would be the most effective way, recognizing that there may be limitation on hearings, to have in front of you enough to help in terms of applications and getting it through, knowing that there are only potentially 5 or 4 public hearings, and that's the crux of the issue, to look in terms of recommendations to deal with how do we deal with this streamlined process, essentially.
So it's my understanding, though, that these projects wouldn't be agendized until they've had a thorough review, planning and zoning review. Is that correct?
Mr. Chair, I believe we're still, as Mr. Gullett said, we're still determining how our process fits in with the 5 reviews currently. As it currently stands, the concept reviews can come with a cursory zoning plan check, and once the applicant submits for project design approval, it does go through a thorough multi-division review to ensure that the project is complete and ready for action. But the details are to come with those changes.
And the clock, though, stops at PDA, or is it at final?
The clock so the clock for staff begins when they submit for PDA. Once it's deemed complete, the clock for you begins until it receives PDA, and then the clock stops.
I think there's some misunderstanding around that topic. I think a lot of people feel that as soon as a project hits the planning desk, that's when the clock starts. And we have 5 hearings at that point to review it. I think maybe a little bit more outreach to the public to explain that part. It's not totally clear to everybody, and I think maybe also to the board as well, that we still have final review to work out details and specific items.
Yeah, and this is new state law passed in October, effective in January, so we'll figuring it out.
Yeah. Okay. So as far as feedback, let's try and focus our feedback. So you were looking for specifically thoughts on the FAR?
Yeah, FAR and the Planning Commission's role. And if you guys want to comment on anything else that was in the Planning Commission staff report, you're welcome to. I think it would be best to get a motion just for staff to be able to clearly convey the board's feedback.
Why don't we just quickly go down the line and give some feedback on thoughts about FAR and what our interaction or desire for feedback from Planning Commission on projects.
I have some broader comments,
Okay.
minor ones. The in lieu fees for parking, I'm hoping that they will be reviewed in this process, because they don't, to me, seem like they're totally appropriate yet. The second item is the no car rule. If I rent the apartment and I say, okay, I agree, I can't, that I won't be able to permit a car, it doesn't keep me from having a car. The third thing is that you'd ask specifically for us to talk about the feedback on the 5 meetings. And I think, obviously, we're going to probably have to comply with this, but it seems like in order for us to do that, we're going to rely heavily on staff reports. And it seems like in order to speed the process, it's going to require an overhaul of how that information is presented to us. And it seems that'll fall heavily on staff. And so I assume that as we go forward with this, that we're prepared to add staff to cover these kind of added responsibilities. That's all my comments.
So just to question about your desire for staff reports. So typically staff reports are zoning related information. Does this comply? How does it comply? So that generally doesn't impact the aesthetics of the building unless they're requesting a modification or some sort of variance to zoning, correct?
Mr. Chair, so there is as stated, there's a zoning plan check that happens at the very beginning before you see a project. And our municipal code requires the agenda to indicate what other discretionary approvals are needed. So if there are modifications that are needed, it's agendized. We're mailing notices to neighbors, so they're notified. So that level of review is happening before you see projects initially. Now, I do foresee our process changing with this new rule limiting the number of hearings. I do see like a more robust review earlier, and these projects are required to meet code requirements. They're reviewed for those at some point thoroughly, and I think that's going to be earlier in the process.
Okay. So, Leon, if you had what do you need to see in the staff report to help review the aesthetics, mass bulk scale?
I'm not ready to answer that question yet.
Anything else?
No.
Chair, I concur with my member. But I just heard something and I think is terrific. Early, robust review before ABR. Really, since these projects are going to really potentially change the direction of our primary corridor or other corridors that are very important, we want them not only to be successful for the city, but for the people who are going to be living there, for the developer. So I would love to have a very thorough, robust review before we get it to ABR, so that any questions that you think that the Design Review Board would be looking at within our parameters be well executed and successfully documented to us, so that we can, in a short period of time, we've only have an hour or so to look at something, really be something that provides us the tools thoroughly that we can look at it and say, yay, this works, or nay, or consider, or let us give you some information. Really do agree. Our staff is terrific, but really come with a real robust, well-documented, well-executed presentation on these projects. Thank you, Chair.
Mr. Chair, I really appreciate the comments on the process, the staff reports. What City Council is going to be focused on is code changes, so the actual zoning. So that's the staff report and process issue is related but separate from what they're talking about. But we're hearing what you're saying on that.
Okay. I guess my comments were, but I'm supportive of the move from density to FAR. I think that's going to help these projects. I think you're correct. You're going to get a better spread of units, probably more smaller units. So I think that's good. I think we do need to be mindful of trying to retain some open space and landscape in particular in these projects that come through. That's one thing that sets Santa Barbara apart from other communities. So if there's ways to try and fit that in the discussion, that's important. And then if there is a way of really pushing for the correct mix and defining the correct mix of unit types, that's really helpful. And I'm also very interested in where the FAR numbers are going to come from. What does the community think is appropriate in balance with what housing needs to get built in the area?
That's our challenge.
Yeah. Okay.
I have one more comment.
Yeah.
I heard early on that one of the premises that you were working with was that the concern of the public there might be more concern about the size of the building than the density. And as a premise, I'm not sure that I think that that's universally accepted. It seems to me that that's too narrow of a premise from which to build this, what we're doing here. So I would question that.
Okay. Anything else? So I know you wanted a motion.
But I think with the comments we received, we can just convey
Great.
those to City Council. I don't think we need a motion.
Okay, thank you. So that was item number 1. We'll move on to item number 2, which is 335 East Gutierrez. Okay. Okay, this
How's it going?
is a proposal for a new commercial structure, and project consists of demolition of both an existing 1,914 square foot damaged retail building and an existing 1,132 square foot storage building, as well as construction of new 2,858 square foot warehouse building. An existing 1,125 square foot storage building is proposed to remain. 3 parking spaces are also proposed. Project requires development plan approval findings and will abate violations identified in an enforcement case. Project design approval is requested, and this requires compliance with the project compatibility analysis, the urban design guidelines, outdoor lighting design guidelines, Haley Milpas design manual, and was last here July 15th of this year. Welcome back. If you could introduce yourselves.
I'm Pete Aylen, architect for the project.
And Chuck McClure, landscape architect.
Okay, thank you.
Anything from staff?
Do we have the, Matthew, do we have the motion from? Thank you. Okay, so last time our motion was continued indefinitely with these comments. Site plan and landscape plan are acceptable. Parking location is appropriate. Add a designated street tree if the arborist agrees that it is appropriate for that location. The board would like to see the proposed paving types contingent upon the stormwater plan. The architecture, which conveys a simple elegance with high windows, is supported. The detailing and materials need to be softened in order to make the project fit into the context of the neighborhood. Examples include, but are not limited to, softening of the parapet molding and illumination of the block. Then provide photos of the surrounding neighborhood and address the height of the building in relation to the rest of the neighborhood. And lastly, consider softening the cantilevers of the canopies. Okay.
Okay. So, after last meeting, there was a lot of discussion. You weren't here.
No.
And I don't remember you being, yeah. But there's some discussion about the Haley Milpas guidelines and how this project, and I think Bob was kind of spearheading that. So I went back and took a look at that. And our project at the corner of Laguna and Gutierrez is in what's called the Boulevard District, Haley Milpas guidelines, which is essentially coming off the freeway and coming into town. And then surrounding it is the industrial district. So the boulevard is the main circulation streets entering the city within this area. And the single most important item in that is street trees to get that boulevard effect. So we've addressed that in the project. We've added a street tree like we talked about at the last meeting. There's no real predominant architectural style, colors. They want them to be lighter, nothing bold. And in the industrial district, they even encouraged some exposed structure. So we took that to heart and kind of softened the design as a result. So on the site plan, the site demo plan, if you're curious about stuff, it's pretty much remained the same. We've broken up the mass of the building a little bit more, and that's reflected in the footprint. We went out and took a look at, after we brought Chuck aboard, landscaping, and we have some areas along Laguna Street where the sidewalk is being raised. It's pretty bad, so we thought instead of just replacing that with concrete, we would go ahead and add some planters in that area. We have this planter, we're replacing a driveway that's here right now. Extended this planter a little bit, and we added the street tree along Laguna Street.
What kind of tree?
It's a carrot. Gee,
It's one that drops a lot of stuff.
Yeah, carrot wood.
Okay.
And we talked to the
Arborist.
about it. Yeah.
Is that the designated tree?
I'm sure it is.
Yeah. So did that. And then we, began our work on the stormwater management. There's a civil sheet attached at the end if you want to take a look at it. But this is about the area of permeable paving that we're going to need to have. The rest of it will, remain asphalt. And we have some permeable paving in here. It's going to have to be in a pretty strong material because of the forklifts and stuff going around the yard. But just to give you an idea, that's right now what we're looking at as far as stormwater management goes. And then on the floor plan, there's not hardly any change really. It's just reflecting the breaking up of the massing that you'll see here on the elevations. So what we had before is we had a line of exposed block at the base of the building and simple openings, and that was the project. And Richard was and Howard were concerned about, they called it a little severe, wanted to soften it up. So what we did was we got rid of the block as requested. I added some vertical elements to kind of break that up and give it a little more industrial style. It's pretty much the same. It's the same mass, same height, size, bulk, scale as we had before. Added some columns. We had some more modern overhangs. So added some columns and made a little more of a traditional overhang and did a little bit of detailing on that overhang. But pretty straightforward. With regards to the height, green screen. Yeah.
What was the question?
He was asking what these are here underneath the windows, facing the window. We're going to do a green screen, bring some shrub massing up the wall. Okay. And we didn't have a section last time, so here's a section just showing how we came up with the height we came up with. So what I did was go out look at this, particularly if you like, but just went out and documented some of the taller buildings around us. So we're here at the corner of Laguna and Haley. We went over to Anacapa on one and kind of over towards Calle Cesar Chavez on the other side. Just to give you an idea, this building's right next to it. I know this because I did this building. That's 29.5 feet. It's essentially the same height as what we have. This one, Susan's office, about 30 feet to that corner. This is over on the corner of Garden and Haley. Around 26 feet, Jeff's building, probably around 29 feet to the top of that railing. Planned Parenthood right next door. The original building's about 33. These are set back at 42, and this is right across the street from us. Pretty good, massive building. This one was deceptive. This is a little church on Haley Street, between Garden and Santa Barbara Streets. And it's actually 27 feet tall. And you guys are looking at a project right next door that's going to be taller than that. As we go up Haley Street, 25 feet, 28 feet, and then Robbins Building down on Santa Barbara,
So the
around 30
comment,
feet.
so the comment was provide photos of the surrounding neighborhood. So do you have photos of what's directly around your property?
Well, that was on the original submittal. They wanted a justification for height. What was asked for.
Well, yes and no. I mean, this is sort of a question and a comment, so it might not be the right time. Do you have those photos with you?
Yeah, they're in there.
Okay, great.
In the set.
We flip to those?
Sure. So there are other photos.
We're good.
We're good? Okay.
Can you tell us a little bit more? For instance,
Well, across the street,
what's what?
if you're looking for a 3-story or a 30-foot high building across the street, that doesn't exist. Yeah.
I'm just wanting to make sure everyone's familiar with the site and
Yeah.
what's surrounded. I appreciate these photos, but we're looking for a sense of what's the fabric around your site.
Yeah, that's what we went through that last time. But
I'm asking you to do that again.
I'm doing it upside down, so bear with me. Across the street, this is looking across Gutierrez from our spot right here. Our spot's right there, so looking across to that guy. This is the brake shop across the way, and as you go down this way, there's a taller building. I forget what they are. That's where Limos Pet Food is. This is looking at our site from across Laguna Street. There used to be a building here, and we had to tear that building down because it's a long story. But the city made us tear the building down after it got damaged.
Do you know what the height of that building was?
It was probably 16 feet, something like that. Yeah, it was a one-story building.
Which one is 16?
It's not on there because we demolished it. Yeah, so this is looking at Gutierrez Street looking southwest. So there's the brake shop again. Across the Home Improvement Center, you kind of see the Home Improvement Center buildings there if you're looking across Laguna Street. This is the building that's right on the corner, single-story building.
Is it true that none of these can be seen from these pictures?
Correct. Yeah. When I thought about neighborhood, I was thinking more of neighborhood.
No, that's fine. That's fine. I want to make sure we've got both of these fresh in our memories, so we can. Okay.
Okay. So that's the height dissertation. I have some colors to show you, just to see what you think. See if my direction is okay. The idea was that the building body would just be a nice shadow white, a very soft accent color for the base and the verticals, And I like to use a colored glass, just very, very light.
Let's flip to the elevation before we set that on there.
Something like so. It has a very light green tint to it. Nothing bold.
Okay.
And then we'll let Chuck talk about his landscape plan real quick.
So, well, before we jump to that, our last point was consider softening the cantilevers of the canopy. So, did you pull
That
it
was-
back, or is that?
I
His
just added
columns,
some detail.
yeah.
Added the columns and just added some detail on top of it. It was just a block, basically.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. Sorry.
Is it in here, Pete?
You bet it is.
So under, here's our new Carrotwood Street tree. And, underneath it, I've got Carissa Tomlinson. And I may have to change that to more like a green carpet because the arborist is concerned that that might get a little tall. So I'm going to change that the next time you see it. Then we've got this, the Cassia leptophylla. These are existing Melaleuca, so there's no change along there. We've got a Cassia, and these are existing palms. And then we've got a Dorianthus. We've got the green screens with just simply English ivy on it, because it is the north side, and we just think a simple, durable, green square rectangles would be the right thing to do on such a tiny space on an active sidewalk. And then we just have a real nice, durable landscape. That's an existing ligustrum hedge, and we just have a nice, durable landscape, a vine or two on these two posts, and one new palm, Queen.
We added a picture too, Bob.
Yeah, so and we got pictures of the plant. And I've got a detail of the green screen that I brought, if you're interested.
I don't need to see it.
And of course, we'll have a good, durable irrigation system.
Okay. You want to add anything else?
No, I think we're good. Thank you.
Okay. We will open this for public comment. Did we get any speaker slips? Okay. Okay, we have Anna Marie Gott. Come on up.
I was a bit too late. We're trying to get something in
passed out?
regarding
Okay.
the computer, so you'll have to take a look at this really quick. I don't know if anyone can actually. Can Tony see this?
You may have to flip it over.
I can't be on your side, though.
Go around. There we go.
Does this, can you zoom in on that? Sorry. I don't know how I'm going to do this page up or down. He needs to zoom in. Yeah, and if, Tony, there you go. A little bit more. Guess move this.
Let's hold it still so he can
Okay.
catch up.
So one of the questions that you had was, exactly where is this? This is the entrance from Highway 101 onto Laguna, right at Gutierrez. So these are the buildings that you start to see. As you exit, on the left-hand side is the bottom picture. On the right-hand side is the top one. They're plaster. They're one story. One has tile, arched windows. Kind of looks Spanish to me. Let's see. Up one. Maybe those are the buildings you're actually looking at when you are at the stop sign. Arched windows, tile roofs, plaster, kind of set back. you can see that the bottom one, the top one is the one that they actually had to bulldoze because of the problem with the water. So that one no longer exists. But that's what the streetscape right there used to look at. It's the first impression that someone from Los Angeles is going to have when they get off Highway 101 and they get off on Laguna. And if you look at some of the other buildings up and down that street, most of them are plaster. There are some warehouse buildings for sure. But I wanted to show you this next slide. Oh, gosh, I'm so sorry. I wish that this was... I wanted to show you this. I don't think the parking calculations are actually working. You've got Building C, which is being used right now for the employee break room. That requires 4 parking spaces unless they're going to be gutting it and turning it to storage. The first building, that's 1,900 square feet, which is the new one, requires at least 2 parking spaces. However, I've been told that, in one of the last meetings, there was going to be some office space. So if there's office space in any of that, you need to add 1 parking space per 250. But look at where the parking is. Under the city's ordinances, your parking is supposed to be at the entrance of your lot, adjacent to your sidewalks, but it's across the way. More importantly, when we were here last time, that big circle that says yard, they said that they were going to be storing a lot of wood and things like that for display. Well, that's also a parking requirement. And it's kind of hard for someone that has a disability to park and then travel across and have to worry about vehicles. So I think that this is not ready for project design approval. I think there's more questions and more vetting that needs to be done. Thank you so much for the extra time.
Of course. All right, would anyone else from the public like to address the project? Seeing no one, we'll close public comment and applicant can come up and back, and we'll go to questions. Leon, do you have questions?
Matthew just handed us this. I'm not sure.
I believe that came from the public speaker.
Ah,
So it's additional information.
okay. I don't have any questions.
Okay.
For the architect, so that I get a good sense of your color scheme and the elevation, which is on sheet.
Do that over here, please, so we
Yeah,
can.
any questions? Would you be able to help me know where these colors are on A 3.1? Because they're not keynoted, at least I could see from your color sheet. So 9.1, I would presume, is the top one for the body of the building?
Right, the body of the building, it would be this area here.
Very good. And then I would, if I'm looking at, where's the little darker one?
Along the
That's
base,
sort of
we
like
have
a,
these guys.
very good. So the pilasters and the base, and then that's it. And then there's a white, am I correct? Or there's no other color down here?
No,
This is, okay. And the frame of the window, I saw that, I think they were aluminum. Oh. I dropped my microphone. I'm always messing up. What are the color frames?
It's a clear anodized aluminum. I have a sample, it's out in my truck.
So you'll see the aluminum, Okay. Are there any, in your opinion, any defining features that are popping? Meaning something that pops, that says, hey, look at me, I'm a building, I'm here, I want to make a statement. Everything seems to be, or is there anything in your opinion that I may have missed that pops? For example, is this that big gray area? What is that?
Just the opening into the warehouse.
Very good. There's no garage door or anything. It's just always open? Okay. Anything else you want to tell me that helps me understand the exterior elevation that is beyond what I just discussed?
I was just trying to keep the design subtle.
Okay.
Simple, nothing popping. I considered maybe asking to use a blue glass or something for the
Very
glass.
good. Very good.
And I have a sample there if you're interested in seeing it. But the whole approach for me has just been, these are two very subtle.
Very good.
Subtle different,
Thank you, sir.
subtle
They're not
differentiation in color.
Okay. Bob?
What's the thickness of the pilasters as they stand proud of the
8
wall?
inches.
8
8
inches?
inches down here, 4 inches up here. It's very, very small.
So is it thicker up to this line and then, okay, so 8 and then 4. Can the height of the building be reduced?
Yeah, we talked last time about why it is, the way it is, and that's why I showed,
Interior function.
showed the section. I said, Hayward is our potential client here, and they want to store 20-foot pieces of stuff vertically. That's what they told us they need in order to get it in, stand vertically. So that's where we started. That's where we started with the 24 feet. On one side, sloped it back a half-inch per foot. Which isn't,
And the parapets are to screen rooftop equipment, or are they?
they're to terminate the roofing. And I want to wrap the plaster over the top of these guys so we don't have any
Okay.
exposed metal or things like that.
But you don't have any rooftop equipment?
Not yet. I mean, in the future, Bob, this could change, and who knows what would happen in there.
Yeah.
Right now, there's no mechanical equipment. It's just an open warehouse.
Okay.
But if we were to change that before we came back to, we'd probably drop that down. But for now, this is what they need, and I just think the scale and proportions of the building.
Sure. And the maximum height that you're proposing at this point is?
28.4 from the finished floor.
Okay.
We've got about another 9 inches or so on the Laguna Street side.
Okay. I don't have any other questions. Thank you.
Let's see. Did you consider the darker window material, the bronze anodized, or anything like that? You just
Didn't consider it. Certainly, if the board feels that is a better direction. I mean, we can also do, we're trying to avoid doing anything too expensive. The custom colors can get up there. So local people are tooled up to do it this way.
And then the fence that you have here. So this is, in this location, it's along the sidewalk, and then it sets back
It's that.
on the corner.
Oops, too far.
So it's on the property line.
It's right there. It's on Gutierrez Street has a 10-foot setback. So it's on that 10-foot setback line.
But this
That-
fence is...
That's the existing fence that's there
Okay.
right now.
So then it steps back.
Steps back.
And this is a chain link right now? And what's this going to be?
This is going to be metal. Steel tube.
Particular, is it going to match the chain link, or is it
No,
going
no,
to
no.
be something like a mesh?
It's going to be similar to the gates and stuff that were done on the police station. If you've seen those. It's got a metal frame,
So panelized
panelized.
metal mesh kind of a thing. Okay.
And the existing ligustrum pushes through the chain link, so you don't really get a sense of chain link.
Okay.
Yeah, as we go down that.
So would this be painted or?
Yeah, it'd be painted. I haven't thought, that far ahead. I was just curious if that direction was something the board could support.
And then your detail on the edge here, is this going to be a metal flashing that comes over the edge of that?
It's probably going to have to be. The way I had it set up before was, it would pick up the water and we just have the plaster edge running around the top. So this might actually just be square gutter that's wrapping around the top.
Any thoughts about like this material here that's visible?
Plaster.
That'll be plaster. as
Plaster,
well.
yeah. Plaster underneath, and we didn't talk about, all the lighting is going to be underneath these guys. We're not going to have any parking lot lights or any lights on the face of the building. Everything will be underneath those
Forgive me, I
canopies.
missed that. Please repeat that. You just said concerning lighting.
All the lights will be can lights underneath these
Very good. Thank you,
canopies.
sir.
Okay. Those are my questions. Let's go to comments. Leon?
As to the subject of popping out the details, I think the glass versus the plaster does that. I don't have a problem with that at all. I like the looks of it. It looks like an industrial building. It's taller than anything around it, and as I see it, that presents some sort of problem for the neighbors in close proximity. But I also see the need for this kind of a building in this location, serving that client. So for me, it's a dilemma to say it's too tall. I see the need. It's specific. That's all my comments.
Chair, I concur that the height is more utilitarian, meeting what you need to do. But I don't like, I'm going to get buzzed. So I concur that the building structure is utilitarian to make for the function that's required for that operation. So I'm fine with the height of it. I don't like the idea that the colors are very muted and that we don't want to see the building. I think that there's no reason not to see the building if it's performing and done well. I think this is an opportunity in this area, that it's an industrial, commercial project, and as Gutierrez and Haley starts changing over the years, where we're bringing in mixed use, we have some projects down on Haley that we looked at the last year, which encourages that dynamics. I don't think this building should embarrass itself and say, "Don't look at us." I think we should look at it. It's part of that new fabric that we're doing in the inner city and working with that. So the color tone that I think you've chosen, I don't think is in the direction I think we should be going in. I don't think we should be, red, everything red, but I think we should say, hey, I'm a building that provides something that's historic to the community that originally was there. Haley and Gutierrez looks the way it does because 80, 90 years ago, that was the function of that community. And now we need to work with this new fabric of how both coexist. So I would say, for me, and I also, by the way, saw the video back in July, don't go muted. Say, I'm a building that provides a function. I'm a building that's important. Every building has a potential of being important. So that's my direction with respect to what I'm seeing. Again, better use of defining colors. I would like to see an elevation that is illustrated, so we can see how what you as the architect and your client says, hey, let's do something meaningful here. I like the size of the pilasters. I think you should be a little bit more defined in keeping with the colors that I'm suggesting and with the frames of the windows, and say we're a building that's purposeful. And what does purposeful buildings do in a community that's important? Again, is the height I'm fine with. The green screens, I think that's good introduction to soften how you respect the streetscape and the sidewalks and the corridor that you're at. I think the initial style is fine. As I mentioned, a little more detailing that I'd like to see how you're going to handle the front eyebrow at the entrances. And in closing, I wouldn't be embarrassed about, and you haven't said that, but welcome this new building and how it works with the new fabric that we're trying to introduce into this community with color, materials, lighting, proportions. I would be very much supportive of that kind of building and not try to hide it and let it do what it's supposed to do. Thank you, Chair.
I'm comfortable with the massing of the building and the height. I think the neighborhood's going to go higher ultimately, so somebody has to be the first, and you're providing for the function of the building with the height. Again, I think the massing is good, the large amounts of plaster, it's fitting with the, loosely fitting with the architectural styles of the neighborhood, and I think it's perfectly appropriate within the Haley-Milpas guidelines. I think the English ivy is a great choice for the
It's
green
not
screens.
spectacular, but it's forever.
Yeah, it's very drought tolerant, keeps its foliage from top to bottom. Good choice.
Thank you.
I wouldn't necessarily encourage you to explore different colors, but I certainly wouldn't discourage it. I think this is going to be okay as it is, and if you wanted to make the colors more vibrant, I'd love to see that too. If you don't mind, Chuck, I'm going to talk to the Street Tree Advisory Committee about changing the street tree designation.
Okay, the carrot wood?
Thank you.
Yeah, it's a pretty nasty thing.
They don't do very well after about 30 years in the ground, and they start to fruit. And
they're sure tearing the sidewalk to pieces.
Yeah. So
okay,
just be
stay
aware
loose
that
on that,
might, by the time you get this ready to build, that may change.
Or approved street tree?
Yeah.
Or, okay.
Yeah. With regard to the planting in the tree wells, with the existing trees, just make sure that any excavation you do to install new shrubs doesn't harm the roots.
Okay.
Just work with the arborist
Okay,
on
I'll
that.
put a note on.
And that's all I have. Thank you. I think, in my opinion, it's very close to being ready for PDA.
Okay. I don't disagree. My only thought is that rather than a clear anodized window system, it might take the building a little bit closer to some of the surrounding buildings and make it a little bit more Mediterranean if it was a dark bronze or bronze anodized. Nothing custom, just a darker system.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
provided to the board and the public concurrently with the agenda was a memo to the board outlining the development plan approval findings and CEQA findings that are required for this project to receive PDA approval this evening. So hopefully you've had a chance to review them. I'm happy to answer any questions about them, but if you were to grant PDA today, we would need those findings read into the minutes as well.
Okay.
Also, staff provided some suggestions for how we felt the project met those the criteria for the development plan approval finding. If the board would like to change the wording or doesn't agree, that's all. It was just a suggestion from staff.
I do have one more comment / question. I would like some reassurance that the parking standards are met. It's been brought up that that the use of the site may be different than what's been stated. The locations of the parking spaces may not be suitable with regard to access to the building.
The project has been reviewed by various departments to determine if it complies with the development standards of the city, and it has been determined complete and complies with the development standards. The storage room that supposedly maybe is a staff break room, that might be an enforcement issue, but as it's being permitted, it's being considered storage.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Does somebody want to make a motion then?
I'd like to make a comment first about this.
Okay.
So I don't remember seeing a memorandum quite like this on other projects. But we have talked earlier about how staff might help us speed the process, and it seems like this is a memorandum that starts us toward that, and I'd like to make that mention.
Okay. So you're saying it makes you more comfortable
It does.
with the,
It does, makes me more comfortable, and I think it gives us direction. And maybe, yeah, I think it gives me direction.
okay. Well,
I'm ready to make a motion, provided the issue of color isn't going to be something that we need to go back and forth on before we get, to final approval. So, if
Take a straw vote on color?
do that. So how many board members feel that the colors as presented are appropriate? Okay. 3-1. How many board members, and this is tough because when we say a more vibrant color, we all have different ideas of what that is. So,
May I, Chair?
yes.
I don't think the word vibrant is accurate from what I would be thinking about. A color that defines the building a little bit better. I think the beiges, the light colors will not define the building well. It's a lovely, potentially an attractive industrial type building. I think that it has an opportunity to help define that corridor with a little bit more utilitarian colors. I think of Helms Bakery and all these other buildings that there's no reason to hide it with these colors. So anyway, that's my thought.
So what type of color, what color would you?
I think that when you look at buildings like this, when I look at, and again, I don't want to design it for you or choose a color. In fact, I don't think that as a design review board, color should, because you can put another coat of color on. Something that defines the building a little better than the colors that you've chosen. I don't want to define the building for you, but something that there's a little bit more uniqueness, more contrasting, something a little more unique. It could go all the way into the grays and the darker colors, all the way into the darker blues, all the way into the more opaque colors, but something that really pops out a little bit more and says, this is a new structure that is the beginning steps.
What I would say is that maybe the best way to proceed is to ask the applicant to return with other options.
Yes.
Of color combinations.
I concur,
What
Chair.
he's proposing is acceptable, but if he wants to bring other options.
I concur, Chair.
Okay, that having been said, I will make a motion for project design approval with the understanding that the applicant has the option of returning with a different choice of colors if he chooses. But the colors as presented are acceptable. And do we need a motion before I read the findings, Mr. Chair? I mean, do we need a second to that motion? Because I just made the motion.
Second.
Okay. Thank you.
Any discussion?
Yes. I think I would disagree with changing the colors into something that makes the building stand out more. So I would like to stick with the colors as presented. I vote for the motion.
Okay.
Well, does the maker of the motion want to change?
We're approving the building as presented, allowing the applicant to return, if he chooses, with color options.
Mr. Chair, what we have right now is applicant has option to return with different color schemes.
I hold with a second.
Okay, so you're okay with that? Thank you. So, the proposed development complies with all provisions of Title 30 of the Municipal Code, and the proposed non-residential square footage is consistent with the principles of sound community planning due to the project's M1 zoning and industrial general plan land use designation. The project is proposed to store wood products to serve the existing adjacent Hayward lumber use The project will provide 3 parking spaces for the 2,858 square feet of warehouse space and will meet the city's parking design standards, and the proposed warehouse will not have a significant adverse impact on the city's aesthetics or character in that the size, bulk, or scale of the development are consistent with Title 30 of the zoning ordinance, as it will be below the maximum allowed height of 45 square feet. The project exhibits an enhanced utilitarian aesthetic consistent with existing surrounding development, and for these reasons, the project can be found compatible with the neighborhood based on the project compatibility analysis criteria found in sections 22.22.145 or 22.68.045 of this code, and the proposed development is consistent with the policies of the City of Santa Barbara Traffic Management Strategy as expressed in the allocation allowances specified in Santa Barbara Municipal Code Section 30.170.030. The proposal will receive non-residential square footage allocation from the minor and small addition floor area categories. Does that do it, Matthew? You need more?
Well, we'll need the project compatibility analysis and the 15183 finding as well. But I believe
I can't read those from here.
Board member Insua has
Quick, does the motion include the opportunity for if the designers want to bring in some new colors?
Yes.
That was
Very good.
stated.
Thank you.
The motion. Okay, those are somewhere in the pink, right? The proposed developments project's design complies with all city regulations and is consistent with ABR guidelines. The project is compatible with the architectural character of the city and the neighborhood. Proposed design of the proposed development is compatible with the distinctive architectural character of Santa Barbara and of the particular neighborhood surrounding the project. The size, mass, bulk, and scale of the proposed development is appropriate for its neighborhood. The design of the proposed development is appropriately sensitive to adjacent city landmark, designated historic structures, historic sites, or natural features, and the mitigation measures are adequate to reduce adverse impacts. That one doesn't actually apply because none of that exists. The public views of ocean and mountains. The design of the proposed project corresponds appropriately to established public vistas. The appropriate amount of open space and landscaping is provided by the project.
and the CEQA 15183.
Where is that?
It should be in the pink.
The next page. The ABR finds that the project qualifies for an exemption from further environmental review under CEQA guidelines section 15183 based on the city staff analysis and the CEQA certificate of determination on file for this project. Okay.
That's everything.
Thank you. Please hold your applause.
All right.
Can we have a vote? Sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Okay, so we had a first and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Thanks, Pete.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chuck.
Thank you.
All right.
I take this picture once, or?
Sure.
That for the record? Isn't that an incredible building?
Okay, so we are going to move on to item number 3, 219 East Haley Street.
Mr. Chair, I need to step down for this item and the following item due to contractual interests with the property owners.
Okay, thank you.
I'll be back at 6:25.
Okay.
Yeah, let's see. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay.
Just barely made it. Okay, so it's item number 3, 219 East Haley, which is a proposal for a new mixed-use development using the AUD program. If I could have the audience quiet, thank you. The proposal includes demolition of 7 existing structures and the construction of a 4-story, 35-unit mixed-use development. Unit mix will include 14 2-bedroom units, 16 1-bedroom units, and 5 studios, ranging in size from 412 to 1,011 square feet, with an average unit size of 719 square feet. Also proposed are 2 commercial spaces totaling 1,816 square feet. The proposed density on this 25,541 square foot parcel will be 63 dwelling units per acre on a parcel with a general plan land use designation of commercial, industrial, medium, high residential, 37 to 63 dwelling units per acre in the priority housing overlay. There will be 35 covered parking spaces for the residential units, 5 covered spaces for the commercial area, with 38 spaces required. Project requires a development plan approval finding for a small non-residential addition as defined in municipal code. Project design approval is requested. Project requires compliance with project compatibility analysis, urban design guidelines, infill design guidelines, Haley-Milpas design guidelines, outdoor lighting design guidelines, and was last here March 25th. Is that right? 2019. Okay, welcome back. If you could introduce yourselves.
Thank you.
I'm True Landscape Architect.
Ryan Mills with DMHA.
Ed Vicente with DMHA.
Okay. So, trying to find our last motion here. Okay. How would you like to do this? You want to review the motion and then go through the changes, or do you want to just present what you've changed?
I think if you want to go over do you have a preference? I think reading the minutes.
Yeah, the minutes were mostly about compatibility guidelines. Well, it's probably good to start there, yeah, because I don't think all the board members were there. And
It's been a while.
bring everyone
Yeah.
up to speed, yeah. A
Okay.
different crowd than who was here. Then.
Okay, so this was, that's February, okay. Twenty-five, 25, yes. Okay, the motion was to continue the planning commission and return to the full board with comments that the project fully complies with all charter municipal code requirements, however, is not fully consistent with the design guidelines. Number 2, the overall character of the design is compatible with the community and with many of the Haley-Milpas design guidelines. The project is architecturally well designed with many strong attributes. And trying to make sure we're on the right motion. Matthew, is this, I have This is the most current motion. This is from,
March 25th, 2019.
Yes.
that's the motion? Okay. It's been a while. So the project is architecturally well designed with many strong attributes. Elements such as the finished plaster, use of wood, cornice detailing, and the breaking up of the overall massing into smaller elements are all beneficial and fitting with the surrounding buildings in the area and helps to reduce the apparent bulk of the building. However, some board members are concerned about the apparent height of the project as it may not relate to the surrounding neighborhood. B, further refine the orientation of the wood at the guardrails and balconies and make them consistent with one another. And C, the board finds that the proposed detail of 6 inches off the finished face of material to glazing at all window units is acceptable. Requests further study as it relates to the outswing door details. D, some board members believe that the podium walls at the east and west as currently designed are successful in that they provide relief off the property lines and further reduce the apparent bulk and scale from adjacent properties. E, the using of plantings along ground floor and upper level is greatly appreciated. F, the board appreciates the use of canopy trees throughout the project. G, the use of aluminum frame windows as proposed is acceptable, and the board requests that the applicant retain the windows and material. H, the proposed use of color to break up the massing is acceptable and appreciated. Then I'm not totally understanding how this is written, because then it goes and seems to go into a different motion. So I'm struggling to.
There may have been a failure.
So it goes through this, and then it starts over, and there's no indication that that's which motion is correct.
This is the motion that carried.
So 111.
It's an Acela issue. Let me see if we can get a cleaner printout.
Okay. Do you have a different?
Sure. So because this project, okay, Kelly Broadison with Community Development, this project went to Planning Commission as is required because it's on a lot that's greater than 15,000 square feet. And it's also in the priority housing overlay. And so we went to Planning Commission on June 20th, 2019, and I wanted to just read the minutes to you that the Planning Commissioner made.
Great.
So the Planning Commission unanimously found that the project is consistent with the goals and policies of the general plan. They unanimously found, I'm sorry, not unanimously, the Planning Commission finds that under the city's zoning ordinances, the project is consistent in size, bulk, scale, and is appropriate for the site. That was 5-1 with Lodge voting no. The Planning Commission found that the open space is appropriate for the project site. That was unanimous. The Planning Commission also unanimously found that the design of the project is appropriately responding to established public scenic vistas because at this particular site there are no established public scenic vistas being blocked or impeded. And the Commission also unanimously found that either partially or fully undergrounding the parking garage is not appropriate for the site due to the environmental conditions. So that was their input on the project, and then of course it returns back to this board for project design approval and eventually final approval.
Okay.
And Mr. Chair, we have the minutes coming.
Great.
I did summarize the minutes in my staff report, if you would like me to read
Sure.
those to you.
Yeah.
At the most recent ABR on March 25th, there was no public comment. The board forwarded the project to the Planning Commission after completing the compatibility analysis criteria and stating that they did not find that the project was fully consistent with the design guidelines, but that the overall character of the design is compatible with the community and with many of the Haley-Milpas design guidelines. Although they stated their appreciation of the architectural design, details, materials, and landscaping, the board expressed concern about the apparent height of the project and felt that it may not be appropriate for their surrounding neighborhood. They stated that as designed, the project is not entirely appropriate in its apparent size, mass, bulk, height, and scale, and is therefore not compatible with the neighborhood. The applicant was asked to study design strategies to reduce the impact on the surrounding fabric of the community and public views of the mountains by sloping the access drive aisle and depressing the parking garage to the greatest extent feasible. The board also stated their appreciation of the open space and landscaping and that the project provides views to the surrounding neighborhood, creates a courtyard for gathering, and has ample use of landscaping throughout the project. So that was your motion at the last ABR meeting, and then it went to Planning Commission with those comments. And then, as I stated a moment ago, the Planning Commission provided their input. As Matt has provided.
Yeah, and those are accurate as you read them. Okay, got that sorted out.
Great. Thank you, Chair and fellow board members. So we've, since Planning Commission, we took into account all the comments from the 3 visits we had earlier to this board, February and 2 in March, and also the Planning Commission's comments. And we made a couple revisions to the project, which were minor, and I'll have Ryan take you through that. And also something that we want to share is we had story polls done for Planning Commission, and we prepared some photo sims that were presented at Planning Commission, and we want to present those as well to you so you can see what they saw and help understand the project. So these are all the things we want to cover. Also, we've got Kim here to present the landscaping strategies, which really goes to livability. And so that, I think, was an important thing that helps kind of wrap the whole project. We've been at this now 3 years on this project, and we've also submitted and worked through all of the departments and have satisfied all of their comments and questions. And so we're ready for project design approval with where we're at and having reconciled all the comments that we received to date. So as was mentioned, the Planning Commission, or the challenge this board had last time is in the minutes was size, bulk, and scale. And so this was something we were very direct with at the Planning Commission. It's really one of the first AUD projects on this block, and it sets a precedent. So it's really important for us as designers, and certainly for you as the board and the Planning Commission, to make sure that we've designed a project in a way that sets a good precedent for the development of this of this block, really. And so we've in looking closely at this in preparation for Planning Commission, we've really fine-tuned very little, since Planning Commission, we've made few adjustments to it. We still believe that the project, as designed with the help of this board over the last 3 years, is still a really solid project. Has the massing in the right places. It fronts the street and addresses the street properly, and also sets the right pattern for development for the block. So with that, I'm going to have Ryan take you through some of the minor changes and also show you our story poll exhibits and photo sims.
Where's our site plan? So there's really 3 minor revisions that this board didn't see before. And the first was driven by we lost a little parcel size. So the ownership team is pursuing a quick claim along the back. There's sort of this, it used to be a perpendicular square. You can see there's a sliver of lot that we just couldn't get the quick claim soon enough to get to this approval and process it. So that's in the works, but we just don't know if that'll happen or not. So we reduced the parcel size in the back, which triggered a couple changes. We are now 1 unit less, which is still our maximum unit, down to 34, and then reduced a parking spot as well. So that's sort of one change, and really we'll take you through elevations, really just changed the rear of the elevation. The other is, if you recall, they were working with the Love's Towing neighbors to do an agreement to access our transformer from their driveway. Same thing, just that's moving a lot slower than as is this project. So we are tackling that internally and just going to be rating that, but putting it inboard. Again, if that comes across our plate in the future, we'll address it, but otherwise we have it on site. So that's number 2. And then number 3, which Kim can address in more detail a little bit later is stormwater management was refined, completed, and then so we've had some adjustments of where we're retaining, where we're planting, and maybe the most significant is down along Haley Street. We have a couple retention planters, 42-inch tall planters along the front elevation, which we'll show you what that looks like. So those are really the three main changes. Let me show you in plan first. I'm sorry, elevation. Let's go to elevations. A201. So just starting at the bottom in the west elevation, this is East Haley Street here on your right. So by and large, the elevation did not change. Previously, this is where it was more open with the transformer gates open to the sky. So now that's enclosed. But we still maintain what the board suggested was successful with the breaking of material and angles, with the ability to plant in those pockets. Otherwise, the changes we spoke about, again, this dark gray box is the adjacent neighbor warehouse building. So this rear property line tucked in, so we've just pulled all of this back. Fortunately, we had a fairly large rear patio, which Kim will share with you in a little bit. So it didn't really compromise the space or the planting we were proposing, just sort of nudged in these buildings. We did reduce these units just by a couple feet as well. So that's that change. Rear parking lot, I recall a couple times ago we actually had this lower, so this is now showing the accurate representation of, the rear parking lot is actually retained by 3.5 feet, approximately, kind of depending on which corner. So the perceived mass of the podium on the north elevation is significantly less. So here's those elevations. Front Haley elevation. You'll see it's actually fairly discrete because we utilized, so the massing and the elevation proportionally didn't change. So we're introduced the planters. There's one here and there's one here in front and engaging the storefront. So we're utilizing the same poured-in-place warm concrete as the planter. So it really blends in with the base elements. Just has an opportunity for planting. So we actually think it might soften that streetscape a little bit. And then,
Ryan, if you could pause
Sure.
on that point, I'll fill in so part of the application completeness was we met with Creeks, and because of the soil contamination in the neighborhood, we wanted to understand more fully how the Regional Water Quality Control Board would look at the property from a stormwater management standpoint. And so that's why there were planters. They were in-ground planters previously, but they don't want any mixing of stormwater and potentially spilling into the curb face, and so we were forced to raise those planters up, which triggered the reconfiguration at the front of the property.
and the last elevation, the east elevation, so again, the dashed boxes represent the adjacent neighbors. These cottages are a few feet off ours, which we can see in sight closely, and then the two warehouse-type buildings towards the back. Again, you see how our rear property line pushed in, as did these buildings, but by and large kept all the massing. One of the past comments was, how much can we play with the heights and the perceived mass of the parapet? So we did that last time, I want to reiterate. So where we can, you can see, obviously, with a 4-story project, we are maxing out on our height limit, but we do have a little bit of wiggle room playing here, again, on the 4-story. So we played with what we thought was appropriate. And remember, all of this does step back, so this is really, the up and down is fairly minor, only in elevation. The oblique views from the ground will be significantly more. So that's our elevations. Sections I just want to land on. The board requested 3D massing views previously, which I'll touch on in a minute. Well, I guess this is the right time. So something that we wanted to address as well as going through Planning Commission was, is this the right pattern of development? So what we heard loud and clear was, yes, this is. It's meeting all the guidelines for what we want these housing projects to be. it's in the middle of the block, so building up to this max height is appropriate. So then we were kind of rediscussing whether how we've massed, our 3- and 4-story portions are appropriate. So maybe looking at this Haley one. So I want to go to the landscape plan for this discussion. Okay, so we wanted just to circle back around and reconvince ourselves. Over the past 2.5 years, we worked closely with the board. We took a lot of feedback. This was really the second rendition that the board provided ample feedback, and we responded, and we feel like we landed on the right type of massing. So very quickly, organizing principles. This is Haley. Breaking up a project of this size with 2 main courtyards connected with Paseo is the right way to go. So it provides more livability, it provides variety. And then in terms of massing, there's a couple ways to consider this, which we'll show you in a second with the photo sim. So most right-of-way perception is coming up Haley Street as it's a one-way. So from a right-of-way point of view, we think massing this side as the 3-story, the lower side first, and then the 4-story really hides the apparent mass really for most of the public perception of this project as you circulate up Haley. So that's one part. But really I think what we paid more attention to was the livability for the residences and, is this the right way to design this project? So again, what we did was we realized, the sun is rising up here and rotating along kind of on the downtown side of this project. So we thought, early morning light gets to spill in through this courtyard, and then by midday, it's streaming down the middle, and then really in the afternoon, we opted for, both courtyards to be broken along the southwest side, again, to allow ample light into these courtyards. So while the Paseo may be shady, we know there's always going to be a courtyard or 2 that will have sun. And then the lower massing along here really allows then some wash of light to hit these faces throughout the day. So internally, we thought that was the most effective way to create the best livability of this project. So that's one quick thing I wanted to touch on. And then finally, let's just see here. I think you guys remember the board requested those street sims we produced last time and then the rendered views just for context. And I think this was some of the minutes where we had been addressing those last 2 meetings about consistency of rail and details. So I think you recall, again, that 3-story townhouse side had the more traditional warm stucco color and traditional detailing. While the white that wraps around has a little more modern touches, but we're tying it together with all wood rail. Again, details we wanted to really cross this milestone and come back for, really fine-tuning all those, but we were happy, and as was the board last time we met, about all the detailing, all the wood detailing coming together. So lastly, let's just show you the sims, because I think this is important. Those in the middle. So story poles went up, and they're always telling, so I want to show you a few, and then we developed sims really from 2 vantage points. So there's more or less directly across the street from our Haley project. And then moving east, kind of looking back past that 2-story church, story poles. This is from the north neighbor on the commercial parking lot behind. Again, you can kind of see it's a bit lower. And then what's on now? Okay, this is coming up from downtown. So this is one of the main views that we thought we'd share with you. So there's the existing condition with, you can see the story poles as proposed, how they sit under the ridge of the Riviera. And then what we did was, using those, we wanted to show a succession of images. Here's our wireframe model overlaid. And there it is in context, simply modeled, but in context and how it sits in the site. And then the next image we wanted to present was the reality. We know this block is in transition. Many of these parcels are being studied for development. So further arguing that as this develops, we wanted to show this is that 14-foot plate. So even a one-story corner project would yield that view from the public as they drive up Haley. So, and of course, a one-story development would probably never pencil, so we would at least assume a two-story. So, but we thought this was important, showing context as that block develops and view corridors. And then looking back, so we're at the garden intersection, looking back, there's a two-story church and some of the other cottage developments. Again, so already we see a peak of our story poles running behind the two-story church. There's our wireframe actually sifting through, and then there's how it lands without anything else on the corner. Let's see. Anything else, or can we let have Kim take you through landscape? Let me switch with you.
All right. So as Ryan discussed, we have been coordinating with the civil engineer to really create stormwater planters that are integrated throughout the project so they don't feel like these treatment devices, that they become really an aesthetic part of the project and really enhance the overall experience of the project. So we do have the 2 raised planters in front, and we're proposing a number of succulents and very light, airy sorts of grasses that go through those planters that allow the light into the storefronts and make some interesting color and interest and texture in the front entry. The bike parking has been added to the front, so it's nice and convenient for people who are visiting the site. As you enter the project and go up the stairs, it opens up to this front courtyard, and we have the first piece of the tiled fountain in here to really create that nice ambiance and sound in the courtyard. And then we have a number of textured, colored plants in here. There's the beautiful archway that leads into the Paseo, so we have the bougainvillea trained up and over that courtyard, to finding this space and creating the entry into the Paseo. We have a number of trees that we're proposing along the breaks in the project. We have probably a nice light, airy tree in here. The Palo Verde would be a good choice as one of our options. So we get that nice color, the texture, and a number of succulents, and then our quintessential Santa Barbara palette around the sides. A number of vertical, taller trees and palm trees, along with some colorful succulents and flowering plants that we bring in along these side corridors. We have these notches so that people have these nice patios on the outside, a little bit of privacy and some color in between the units so that they can really use these outdoor spaces. As you move down through the Paseo, again with these stormwater planters being at these different sizes, we have the taller ones at 42 inches, and then we have 30-inch height planters and then some 18-inch seat walls. So it really creates a number of spaces through here, opportunities for seating areas for residents, the main circulation place, but then some nice places to relax, enjoy coffee outside, and meet your neighbors and walk around. The back courtyard is more of a quiet, reflective space. We have a nice soft fountain in the back. And again, a number of pots. We can bring in the glazed pots to kind of give those punches of color along with our bold accent plants. And then we're bringing in a number of these variegated plants in throughout the project. So we get this nice year-round color and texture throughout the project. So we're not relying just on flowers, but also on the plant palette. And again, with the olive trees in the back here, slightly screening through here, but then allowing those views and the air and light to come through and wash over the back courtyard. And And we've done the same sort of treatment on this side of the project, where we have the tall vertical, a lot of the interesting palms, and some of our aloes, tree aloes. Oh, we're on CL2. There you go. Yeah. And we have images of all the plants proposing, and then some of the character that we're trying to create. So along the side here, we're using the ground level planters, tall vertical plants, and then again the bolder accent plants on the ground plane, and then carrying that up, same palette up into the courtyards. To really try to create a lot of interesting spaces for all of the people that are living here, and giving them options, and also trying to soften the building from the sides and from the surrounding neighborhood. And as you go up into the upper courtyard, the upper walkways here, we've carried through some of these pots, and then proposing a number of these vines that will spill down. So we get that nice Mediterranean character and the color of the bougainvillea splashing down over the railings. And again, these pots give you that nice accent as you walk across to the units. You get the color and the texture again, and that feeling. And there's any other questions on the landscape or the street? So we have the parkway out here, 2 of the firewheel trees, which is a nice vertical evergreen tree, kind of tropical foliage, which is the approved street tree for the block. And that's a nice tree for the scale of this building. And a nice green evergreen walkable ground cover on the ground plane with some breaks in between with some succulent masses. And then our Cape Rush and some of our spiky plants that will allow air through and light through into the commercial spaces down below. And the breaking up of the commercial spaces, or some gathering spaces out here, and with the planters in the front. Is that good? Okay.
So, Chair and fellow board members, so this is really the culmination of the work with the board over the last 3 years. It's always a challenge when you max out the density on these AUD projects, and the push and pull with the board has been helpful in challenging us in our organizing principles. And how do we play with the masses and work with the aesthetics of the building to really come up with something that is Santa Barbara, that looks and feels good for the residents that live on the property, but also sets the right pattern for development on the block. So as we've stated, we've addressed all the issues that have come up from all the other departments. Staff is satisfied with our application being deemed complete. So, yeah, we request project design approval today and look forward to fine-tune final colors, details, lighting fixtures, any other finer elements that can wait till final approval.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. If that's everything, then we will open it up for public comment. Thank you. All right. So I have.
I
Yeah.
usually make room. Is that new?
No.
Oh.
Unless the chair tells you to come up, you'll stand at the podium.
I have something to show.
You can pass it through the secretary.
First, we have John Campanella. You have 2 minutes.
Thank you. John Campanella, I'm liaison from Planning Commission to ABR. Ms. Brodesson told you what our findings were, and I just wanted to reiterate the way we looked at the project and the applicants. I feel they really sensitively put this project together, responding to the minutes that we saw from ABR, and I think there was a lot of consideration for the area neighborhood and also livability for the people that were there. So we made our findings on compatibility based upon what we saw they put together, how they treated it, and again, it was very impressive, and I'm impressed again today. And it's good to see how they go through the process, because as you heard earlier, we're going to be looking at different FAR ratios and things in the future. But I think going beyond numbers, we also have to see how things fit in to our neighborhoods and trying to achieve and balance those goals. So appreciate the work they've done and support the work that they've put together. Thank you.
Thank you. And next, I have Anna Marie Gott. You have 2 minutes.
I actually have something to show. It's going to be a lot easier than my computer last time.
Okay. Is it something you can pass out, or is it something you want to put on
No, I
the?
actually have to point to it.
Okay.
I didn't bring enough, I thought.
Could step back and come on over. Okay.
Okay, good afternoon. So I sent an email, and if we can have someone actually zoom in on this, this is your agenda. Your agenda is not actually agendized for a development plan approval finding, and you have to make a development plan approval finding so that you can make the compatibility findings. More importantly, this agenda is not actually agendized for CEQA. So if you take a look at this, it would have been nice if someone had actually said that there was a report that anyone could review on the website regarding the staff memo that was provided that instructs you to actually make CEQA findings as well as the DPA findings. If you take a look at this, this is what you are scheduled to look at today. But again, you cannot make project design approval PDA findings because the project does not meet the ordinances. The only way it can meet the ordinances is if you actually make a DPA finding. This is the same problem with 335 East Gutierrez that you just actually approved, and which I noticed staff members and a number of other people, including Ms. Ostringer, who is not here today, well before this meeting this afternoon. So I just want to know, are you going to make an approval of a project without being able to make a DPA finding because it's not noticed? And this is your agenda. Please read your agenda because this is what you guys are actually supposed to be doing. It does talk about Haley guidelines, it does talk about PDA, but there are no CEQA findings and there is no DPA finding. It may be here in the description, but this description has been here for a substantial period of time. And before you make DPA findings, people must receive a written public notice in advance, and you've got to get it on the agenda, and that's not been done. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And next we have Robert Hunter.
Probably be easier for me to point to the plans on a couple of items here.
Okay, come on up.
Robert Hunter, I'm the owner of 221 East Haley, which is the residential, the bungalows that are just over on this side. And I attended the June 20th meeting and objected to the fact that this creates this huge shadow pattern because the 4-story, piece is on this side, where this side is the commercial side, and so we, the applicant has started to try to address that, and we've started, having meetings, but we have not completed, some sort of mitigation of that. So we continue to work on that. And my question is that if there's still something to be done here, does design review have to review that after those changes get made?
We're here to listen to your comments. We can't.
So that's the thing is that if that has to happen anyway, then this is a little too premature. So as far as pattern of development, the other side is most likely going to have 3-story at the corner coming up to 4-story. This has the 3-story here going to 4-story. Then this project, which is single-story but probably will be at the 3-story level when it's completely developed. Then it's 2-story here. So you've got the 3-story if this was 4 over here and this sawtooth was here, then you would actually be stepping it back down to the 2-story that's right here on the other side of us. So from a pattern of development, it makes sense to come up from the street to the 4-story and then start coming down to the 2-story.
Okay. That is 2 minutes.
Yep. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Would anyone else in the audience like to address the board about this project? No? And then we did also receive several letters via email from Patrick Gordon and several others as well, which we had emailed earlier this week or last week and today. So with that, we'll close public comment and ask the applicants to come back up and go to questions. Leon, do you want to start?
One of the things that well, I have a question, first of all. Of the comments from the board at the last meeting, you had read one about the window setback. Could you repeat what that said? Because I couldn't quite follow that.
It was kind of a convoluted way of saying that it was okay that the windows were recessed 6 inches from the face of plaster.
Okay. So my question is that it appears that by the floor plans that recess is obvious from the front elevation, but all of the elevations, including the graphics, seem to indicate that the rest of the windows also reset, but the plans don't show that recession except on the front elevation.
That's a question.
Yeah. So that was a conversation we had the last 2 times. So where it is obvious in our current plans are, in particular, the front and back elevations, where that's a 12-inch recession. So you see the walls return. I'm looking for a plan. And then as part of, let's see, let's show here. Small scale here, but you can see along Haley. So those large scale openings along the right of way return in is actually 12 inches to the face of the window. So that was step 1. And then the other was, if you recall, we don't have the details, aren't a part of this set yet, but on the record that was placed because we brought in some loose details, which we're still committed to, that dimensioned 6 inches from the face of our stucco walls to the glazing of all of the windows, and that would be our typical detail throughout. And at that time, the board said that was an acceptable response. So that would still be on the record this time, and we would bring back that detailing with all the others.
The elevations are certainly enhanced by the way you've drawn that recess. Mm-hmm. That detail may or may not satisfy me as far as how that might resemble that which you've shown on the plans. So, but we can look. I'm willing to wait to see what that looks like.
Great.
My second question is, first of all, to say that one of the things that the board did say was we wanted to see if the interiors could be softened. And we've said that several times, and it certainly seems like that's happened. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to make that. And my question is that I like the idea of the hanging bougainvilleas that go from 3rd floor to 2nd floor. The fact that we don't have a landscape architect here at this time puts me at some disadvantage to comment about some of these things, but it seems like we're planning to do that from those hanging bougainvilleas from pots. And at least that's what it looks like from the plan, which seems pretty optimistic to me. So I'm just wondering how that might happen.
We're doing it both from the ground level planters, so they would be trained up the walls, and then there are also some larger 42-inch pots on the balcony levels that would have the larger vines that can spill down.
So are those
and so those would be on the rail on the CL3 sheet, where we have a couple of those pots on the top.
So I'd like to look at, I didn't see the 42-inch. CL3?
Yeah. So they're here. So we have some of these larger pots, the round pots where the staircase ends here. Tuck that in the corner to soften that stair return, and so that pot size is large enough to get a good sized vine that can then spill down and be trained along this wall here. And then again, this long narrow planter here, we can get that a good sized vine in the corner and have that coming down this wall here. So that's our idea, is to try to get those to come through.
That's all my questions.
Okay. I personally think from the first time I saw this project, it's a great project, especially down this corridor on Haley. But there's some things I want to mention, and then they're going to make them into a question. The architect had mentioned that they were concerned and had been hearing often the size, bulk, and scale of the project in its context, so I'd keep that in mind. At the last submittal, the minutes and the motion indicated the general consensus that the height of the projects adjacent to the neighbors, especially those on the north, that wall was very high adjacent to them, and especially in their relationship to them. And that one of the comments were to explore, and it was mentioned in one of the comments that we had mentioned in the minutes, to explore the possibility of being able to reduce the podium height by doing a semi-subterranean parking. It was one of the thoughts that were out there. Did you guys have an opportunity to explore that avenue and your thoughts concerning the semi-subterranean?
Chair Moore and board member, and so absolutely, I think we looked at this from every angle. Previously, we even presented a PowerPoint to this board about the constraints that were keeping us from doing that. Number one, the site is part of a groundwater contamination of the block, and there's monitoring wells that have been in place for numerous years. And when we had the wet season last year, our well on site, the water was 8 inches below the top. So part of the follow-up before we went to Planning Commission from when we last saw you was to check in with the Regional Water Quality Control Board and the Creeks Department and get an answer on, hey, is this a problem? How do we treat the stormwater on this property? And they pretty much said, you really can't infiltrate. So you'll see in our civil plans, we actually had to put in a concrete basin to deal with that. And any pushing the project in, it would be quite costly and create more complications with the contamination in the groundwater. And this is why we very specifically asked the Planning Commission to chime in on this. And we were brief on the comments, but they even made a specific motion that the project should not be lowered partially or at all, because they were concerned about the additional costs that would be passed to the renters for that, and they felt it was the wrong precedent to set for the future development to push any future development on this street, to push it down was the wrong precedent.
And those comments and recommendations were documented in writing?
As part of the Planning Commission.
Just an idea. It was documented in writing that their recommendation is not to go below the existing grade.
Yeah, their minutes, which we read, was a singular motion that the commissioners made to make sure it was clear. The Planning Commission finds that either partially or fully undergrounding the parking garage is not appropriate for the site due to environmental conditions. It was approved 6-0 by the Planning Commission. So they wanted to opine on that further.
Thank you. And I think it's important to keep reiterating because it's come up. And I don't say it because I just want to hear my voice. I want to say it because there are design factors. And thank you for being clear as to why this is a challenge. I say that, and I want to bring it out so that we can have it on the record. There's a reason why we don't have a semi-subterranean and make it crystal clear with respect to design. Okay? The design, landscaping, podium. Got it. Okay, thank you.
Questions?
Yes. Since we're on landscape, we can start with those first, if that's okay. Thank you. These little pockets on the east, I guess we're going to call them north and south, right? North and south elevations. How are they going to get watered? Like these guys, that guy, and these guys? Is there going to be irrigation systems? Or?
Automatic irrigation system. Okay. Yeah, exactly.
And then how do they get tended to?
That's a question that we're probably going to have to come to. We've discussed possibly, there's a fire escape door on the bottom. We're probably going to have some sort of maintenance access or hatches coming in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so at the end of the day, creating those pockets for landscape opportunities, which we're showing, are feasible, but it absolutely takes a relationship with both neighbors, which we had begun and introduced on this side. So as we talked about this, and then with our new neighbor here, as we meet with them and move forward, this absolutely takes a relationship for both properties to be able to maintain that.
Okay. Something about landscaping. It's probably going to be better on the side elevations, maybe? If we look at the elevation sheets, that might help there. Sorry. Oh, maybe while we're looking at that, the other question I had for you on the plantings in those little pockets, it's what's the max height of those? There's a few trees that are planted along there. Not the Mozambique aloes, but the taller trees that are proposed.
So the cordylines can get to probably around 20 feet tall, 15 to 20 feet. And they can, as they get older, they'll have multiple heads on them. And then the palm trees on the other side can get taller, 30 feet, I think. The Kenchias, 35. And then also back to the, specifically have very low maintenance requiring plants in those landlocked areas, yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks. So on this elevation, I remember a while back you guys took these wall lines and you started to kind of drop them back a little bit and push them in to kind of start the articulation. So there's these little lines here and here that look like they're matched up with the adjacent plaster walls. Is that just like a rendering that's not completed, or is that like a little guardrail?
That's actually guardrail, so it's a good opportunity to kind of address some of those things. So the previous couple renditions we studied, and at the same time when we were breaking up the in and out of the wall, we studied the height of it too. So that line represents the 42-inch height guardrail. So yes, we would like that to be lower and have maybe a foot of airspace to the balcony there, and then the white stucco is at the 42. So we try to employ that around. However, there are some places we just have to wait and see. Like these areas were also a natural opportunity. However, there are also the ones where we would like larger canopy trees. So we let it be 42 inches tall to get as much soil material in there as possible. So while we could lower some of these, but we wanted to balance out with some of the more healthier, larger landscape.
So if I'm understanding, like on that situation, there's a planter on the back side of that wall that we're not seeing, that, and so you're keeping the top of that wall high.
Here we are keeping that height. We're doing that along this side rather than lowering it like we were on this side.
Gotcha. And then how do you see that material and detailing looking like for those little, plus or minus a foot of guardrail meat?
These, quite honestly, we have not detailed those. Presumably they'll follow suit, although we just haven't studied that. So we have wood detailing throughout.
Right, that's kind of good.
So we, quite honestly, have not addressed that rail detail.
Okay. Aside from these wall conditions, are there other opportunities that we aren't seeing with these elevations that you're going to explore dropping, or you have explored dropping down those wall lines to get articulation happening like that?
We were content with as proposed. We thought there was the right balance. We didn't want to, we did plenty of sketches. We didn't want it busier than this. Once you start doing more, it got even busier. Likewise here, again, between the amount of breakups and the existing buildings or future development, we weren't compelled to break it up anymore. We've kind of felt it was the right balance.
Cool. And then since we're on this elevation, has there anything been looked at on this wall face right here, just because of the nature of it, that you have so many other punches happening and pushes and pulls going on through the rest of the building, but it feels like that guy right there starts to kind of be a little bit, that volume looks a little bit different than the rest of them.
What you pointed out is one of two 0 lot line conditions, or nearly. There's one here coming up Haley, and then this would be looking back behind that 2-story church. So we don't have the ability for true openings. We could do perhaps a cosmetic or a faux opening of some sort, and
I didn't mean it's more of just a detailing, I guess, or in a bigger sense, if there's detailing of whether it's openings or any kind of finished work
That's something we could study. We could introduce a couple decorative elements, but it wouldn't be a true opening.
Okay. And then for the project, are you guys looking at any kind of control joints for your plasters, or are you going to try to get away from that?
It's always a conversation with the contractor. We prefer not. I mean, we like some of these quicker set base materials with some fiber reinforcing, and not put in the full 12 foot by 12 foot control joint. So again, that's a detail that we haven't thought so far, but our strategy is always for Santa Barbara projects to minimize that, if not eliminate it.
Yeah. Additionally, we want to give projects the best shot, so the reduction of massing, I think, is helping us. We're close to it. I mean, getting a unit or so wide at least gives us a really good chance at achieving that rather than larger expanses.
Okay. Since we're on here too, there's something I was looking at these elevations that's kind of funky, and I think, some of it has to do with the change in there's not a lot, but there's that step in, or more or less a change in topography from the adjacent neighbor from the north to the south. So here we have that max height line, which I think is at the 45-foot line right there, this guy?
Correct.
Okay. And then here at 45 feet, these relationships here are a lot more than I think what we're seeing here. So, but I'm assuming we're probably going to see, because these are pushed back, some of these heights closer there?
No, this is the 3-story side, and what we're getting a glimpse of a 3-dimensional max height plane cut in different locations, north versus south.
The 45 on the south.
But again, so it looks like we're obviously at 4 stories maxing out. We need every inch we can get. And then on the 3-story, we're actually significantly lower, but we're having substantial parapet heights here. That's why it looks like it's still closer to the max height limit. Is that the question?
I guess I was more confused, but that this 45 looks pretty maxed out the volumes, but then we're not even catching like a glimpse of the background, and to kind of give a sense of
right. This is a perception thing. We could show maybe scaled back to 20%. Yes, you would in true elevation see that 4 stories beyond.
Okay, because here I think you're starting to
like
do it there and there, and I think it kind of helps a little bit.
Sure.
And so, for instance, this guy.
Yeah.
If we mirror it, is that going to show up somewhere right around here a little bit? I mean, this is an architectural element, so I'm not so worried about it, but it's...
Yes. So...
if we could, actually, it's one of the reasons we did the photo sims. Okay. How does the 4-story appear beyond the 3-story portion? So this is one of the things when we modeled it and laid it in, we were pleasantly surprised that. As you can see, the 3-story facade we were just looking at here, the 4th floor beyond really does hide behind just because of the perspective view. So this is a good tell as to how much you'll see from behind.
And do we have some from further down Haley from that next intersection looking back that way?
That's exactly what we have, yes. So here again is the completed photo sim. So here you can see the 4-story portion and how we're pushing and pulling back and forth along this elevation. And what's interesting too is you can see down Garden Street, the SB Cast project, which is a 3-story project, but from a total height or perception, at least from the intersection at Garden Street, it's almost about the same perceptive height, perceived height from that location. So again, these are things that were there. It was a good exercise to go through this.
Okay. And And then the last thing would just be, I think you said in your presentation, but based on one of your biggest drivers, I think, for the decision, it sounds like, is the amount of mitigation, the cost of the mitigation that will have to happen if you guys start going too deep down into the soil, right? So I think we had some comments last time about looking at articulation, the way to start getting these, whether it's the back part of the back portion of the site or individual massing elements, but start getting them to articulate a little bit more. And it seems like, were there any instances where that was able to happen?
Well, what this represents, we agree with the comment, and we would like to achieve that as much as possible. So again, we have to think about this in 3 dimensions. So what this represents is what is possible with a 4-story podium project at this area. We really have very little room to lower that plate height. I mean, we can see how much more we can squeeze under 8'1" or 8'2". We don't think that's very desirable or effective. And then this is our max height. So it's pretty challenging to create much more than 6 or 7 inches of variation. That's why we employed the tactic of in and out as well. So as you're looking
height-wise,
up,
was there anything with height? Was there any differences?
well, this is where we landed. This represents the amount of height variation we can achieve on that 4-story project. There's no more. We cannot.
I get that
again
part.
until we reduce the podium.
I guess that's what I'm asking, is from the last scheme to this one, aside from that set along the top line, was there anything else that was done with bigger blocks to shift them up and down?
No, and we weren't comfortable proposing any reduction in height in the podium at this level until, again, we think the depth of the lot and fall and all the considerations were, we think we're always trying to be conservative but realistic, and we would hate to overpromise something we can't deliver in terms of lowering that podium. We haven't seen any reason why we can lower it at this point.
I think so. That's it. No further questions.
Okay. I have a clarification. So this mass right here, is this on the property line?
That one, no. So we can go. Let's go to the floor plan. I'll show you.
That's right. It steps back. Was this planter zone here?
So previously it did. So you can see 2 visits ago we broke up this wall and then actually pushed our podium, and then the height stepped back beyond that as well. So you can see the edge of the current existing bungalow. I think they were. Do you recall what scale this is? Is that 3 or 5 feet? Which we mimicked on their side. So I think we got to 6 to 8 feet distance.
And the same thing. So this wall is on the property line here. This wall is on this. And then
That's the one Mr. Watkins pointed out here. It was here and here. Correct.
The only other question I had is sort of following the line of questioning about the railings and things like that. Is it, in your opinion, would it be better to have a little bit taller wall along the edge of these decks for privacy concerns for the neighbor, just as instead of introducing a handrail and dropping that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think that's something we will pick up as we meet with our new neighbor and work through both adjoining projects. It's a discussion. I think we already had one about privacy from both sides of the fence and what would be more appropriate. So it's always a balancing act. So we, to this point, had been trying to bring everything down on this podium as much as possible because that was the concern. So we hadn't thought about starting to bring things back up to this point, or if that would even be acceptable.
I think most of the concern is for the overall mass, trying to bring the roof, the skyline down versus these individual concerns lower down. We already know there's mass above that.
Right.
Okay. Comments?
As regards to the west elevation,
Go to elevation. Where are those?
I think what you said was the reason that 4th story isn't shown on that elevation is because we really can't see it. And as far as making a presentation to this group, as a practice, I don't, it doesn't seem right to me. I mean, the elevation is the elevation. And we have to believe your assumption that it can't be seen. And I would, so I'm uncomfortable with that practice. That's all.
No other comments?
No.
Okay. Sure I don't get buzzed. One of the things that I have not liked about the project is that the project actually starts about 10 to 12 feet, more or less, above the adjacent grades, right? So the neighbors on either side are going to be, especially the one on the northeast side, is going to be looking at a wall like that. And the reason they need to look at a wall like that is because of the challenges we have on the site with the drainage or the lack of drainage and water issues. Having accepted that, the next question is, okay, to mitigate that, you try to build a development that's at site, you know, and not as high density, not with the podium that high up. You don't have such an aggressive project that has so many units. You start at grade, or relatively at grade. You can go a little lower. And then do your development at that site. And it's not going to be as high density. You're not going to have as many units. And I know for the owner-developer, monetary dynamics and development issues are very important. They're always important. But I'm extremely concerned that you have this project that on three sides, you got the retail on the front, but on three sides, you got this very tall wall, and it's been a common theme that has been discussed from May, when the neighbors were here, and it hasn't been addressed that well for me. It's a project that's very tall, it's allowable, but does it meet the aesthetic fabric of that corridor today or tomorrow? And that for me, having this podium be where it is right now and then start the development from there in the current situation as what this community is, I'm not a fan. And I know it's dollars and cents, and I know it makes, you know, development monies and income, but I think it poses quite a hardship on the neighborhood, and especially those adjacent neighborhoods, that this high podium, I continue to struggle with that from the very first time when I saw it, as some of the community had talked about. Thank you, Chair.
Watkins?
I agree with Board Member Insua's comments. I think about the wall. I think there's, I think that part of the project hasn't been vetted like 100%. I think as it could, and I think if there's, I'm going to try to pull these all together. The comments that were there before, I think about the overall heights that were starting to, that were the massing itself being, you know, portions of the massing being too big. For the development, I think if we can't flex with the height in any way, then I think moving forward, maybe other opportunities and maybe look at the walls then, because if you do have that benchmark more or less that's there, and that can't get dropped in any way, then maybe there's a way that the treatment, you know, the wall itself starts to be looked at, you know, the detailing, the finishes itself to start giving a smaller scale versus the one flat plaster wall. I mean, a plaster wall versus a brick wall, the same height, can look kind of different sometimes, because of the fact that you just have your mortar joints at different scales. So maybe that's an effort there that could be looked at if the height can't be, altered in any way on the portion of development. That being said, though, I still have challenges accepting that, I get the issue about the water because of that area, especially the corner it's testing too. But you're going to have to dig down into that site anyways for your footings. I mean, a 4-story building is not going to have footing that's less than 8 inches deep, so no matter what, you're still going to have to go into that site for some things. I'd say a decent amount of foundation so you're having to already go down there into the soil already, and you're going to be doing some mitigation, and there'll be a phase 2 probably if it hasn't been done already. And I'm only bringing this up because I've had to deal with this in my project, so I understand it's a pain in the butt, and it's it adds cost to the project. But I think a project this size, it's a well-needed project. It's a nice project. It's nicely designed. It's appropriate, I think, in a lot of ways of what it could offer. But the context of what the neighborhood is right now, I think because the comments have been consistent, for a while now about the height being an issue, about how to break that up and how to alter it. I think that still has to be looked at because no matter what, it's not like you're building a slab on grade and you can't go down in that soil. You're going to have to go down to it anyways. So I think if there is excavation that has to occur, I'm not understanding how the excavation is going to stop at 8 inches and not anything more than that. And if it does have to go more than that, then I think there is an opportunity to find some kind of sloping. I don't necessarily think it needs to be a full level or half level. I think that's a lot, but even a couple of feet on this kind of project would help here because you have maybe 801 is a better image to show. Thanks. Yeah. So, for instance, I think this part of the development, I think the perimeters, most of them are this reads as individual massing, elements. There's clearly distinguished roof lines. They stagger. You see it again here. I think this is really telling that you have this undulation of roof lines that happens over and over. I think that's probably one of the most successful parts. The project looks great, and that part of the project, it really doesn't read as a high density project. This, though, just by the representation, that's a flat roof line more or less. That's a flat roof line more or less. So that this stepping, this articulation that's happening in so many spots on the frontage and over here, all of a sudden these buildings, they have it on plan view with the wall lines, but the roof lines are still flat. So I think that's, for me, is trying to see something like this. And if it isn't something where the massing is necessarily being brought up and down because of the grading issues, maybe there's ways with some architectural detailing where you're able to get past those height lines where it's not plate heights, but you guys are looking at detailing it in architectural elements at that point. But I think something needs to be added there, even if it has to go up in certain points where it maybe isn't the whole development, but where it starts to break up these masses and you start to get smaller forms. I think that would be successful. And I think there's ways to do that. You guys have done that a lot with detailing. I think that's an opportunity because, again, you're exempt from the height limit. Then at that point, you're not having to change much of the project's overall characteristics. With landscaping, too, I think if there could be more definitive process about, or I guess not program necessarily, but I don't know if it's an agreement or some way that the how those things are being worked out with the watering and stuff, because I think they are pretty crucial to the project as they look great right now. But if there's not a plan in place where you guys get access from the neighbors or there's an irrigation system or something, and they die, then there's these pockets now that were being used to kind of filter that apparent massing of that podium, and then they're gone. I think that would be a concern is if that landscaping goes away because of lack of care. And then we're left with this project that, again, those elements are looking starker than they could. I think those are two big concerns there. Yeah, I think overall I would just say to provide some more character-defining features or architectural detailing or maybe finish treatments to help provide a more appropriate massing and scale and start breaking up those forms more so they do start to look more like what's happening on, along this part of the project and this part of the project where there's more differentiation or definition along the roof lines. Yeah, I just feel that right now I'm struggling with how it ties in with the rest of the the area right now still just from that apparent bulk that's happening there. But the pieces are there. I think you guys have, at core, a good project. Detailing and things like that, I think that would be something for the next run, is more the guardrails that came up in the conversation, little detailing, things like that, door and window details, what that looks like. I think that would be the next step. But what you guys have shown so far in your renderings and stuff, it's trending in the right direction. I think it just would help to see those in the set now. That's it.
Okay. Matthew, I know Kelly left, but do you have the Planning Commission's motion? Andy?
Mr. Chair, unfortunately, I do not. That was with the case planner.
Can I borrow yours? Okay. So, at the Planning Commission, they voted that the project was consistent with the goals and policy of the general plan, that the project is consistent in size, bulk, scale, and is appropriate for the site, that the open space is appropriate for the project, finds that the design of the project appropriately responds to established public scenic vistas because there are no established public scenic vistas being blocked or impeded. And then the Planning Commission finds that either partially or fully undergrounding the parking garage is not appropriate to the site, for the site, due to environmental conditions. So I guess I disagree with my fellow board members. I mean, this project has been pretty well vetted by us and the Planning Commission, planning staff, and other than some fine-tuning of the podium base, I'm not sure how else they could continue to modulate the roof lines or the ins and out of the building to make it less massive. It's a housing project that the city needs. This area has been earmarked for this type of density. Planning Commission has reviewed it and found it appropriate. So as far as I'm concerned, the thoughts about further changing the height, I think, are just, that's been determined, I feel like. I feel like that the applicant's gone to the extreme to try and make us happy with the podium. I agree, maybe there's some treatment details that might visually make it less tall, but I guess I just don't agree with the rest of the board on this. So, if somebody wants to make a motion, since I'm in the minority, I'll leave it to you folks.
What happens if we don't make a motion?
Always got to make a motion.
We would have to continue the item.
Mr. Chair and board members, if you do continue the item, it is helpful to the applicant who will be returning if you could provide some direction. Though it's not necessary, I suppose.
I may recommend to make a motion first, see if there's a second, and if not, deliberate until you can't, but obviously not go on for perpetuity.
Right.
I could try to craft a motion. Just trying to write them down. So I would say motion to continue the project for PDA with the following comments.
So are you saying granting PDA? Are you?
No, motion continue, sorry.
Let's say continuance.
Constant continuance. Let's see, let's start. If request the applicant provide I don't want to say this. If the applicant can update the elevations to, on the north and south elevation, to provide a semblance of massings of the project in the background for
whole project.
Yeah, I didn't want to say complete or anything like that because it's.
Specific elevation?
I would say at all 4 elevations, but to do so in a manner that's faint, just to give us an idea. I don't expect them to do a full one. Yeah, it doesn't have to be crazy.
So, did you say all 4 elevations?
Request that the applicant provide architectural elements or treatments and finishes to reduce the apparent massing of the project along the podium walls. And what elevation do you guys want to call this? So it's like north and southeast. On the east elevation and articulation of more dramatic articulation along the east elevation roof lines. Request that the applicant continue working with neighbors to establish a, what do you call it, an access plan for landscaping, or it's not really an access plan. We need to say an agreement with adjacent neighbors for access to landscaping pockets to clarify that, to clarify future intent.
Mr. Chair, Board Member Watkins, yeah, unfortunately
Okay.
that gets into
Okay.
something outside of the purview of the
We'll
board,
scratch
but
it
yeah.
Request that the applicant provide full details of, or should provide details including doors and windows, guardrails, balconies, and proposed fountains, site fountains. Does he have those images?
So for PDA, you want full details?
Yeah. Or just not full, the ones that we called out right there, those are the big ones. Doors and windows, guardrails, patios. Have you guys shown lighting yet before? Like, have you shown us any conceptual lighting? Do you have any landscape lighting on your plans? Okay. Do you guys?
No, we were needing to cross this big
Get this hurdle.
milestone to
Okay.
commit to that next round of resource, time, detailing. So our understanding of the milestones for the city is not that, so we haven't committed to that.
Those would be my comments from the motion right now.
Second it, but I'd like to hear the motion read.
Chair Moore and Board Member Olson, we have an indefinite continuance.
Speak into the microphone.
We have an
please.
indefinite continuance, motion made by Watkins, seconded by Olson, that the applicant update all 4 elevations to provide a faint massing of full project, provide architectural elements or treatments and finishes to reduce the apparent massing of project along podium walls. On east elevation, provide more dramatic articulation of roof lines, and provide details of doors, windows, guardrails, and proposed site fountains.
Could I clarify one before you jump? The comment about the roof lines along the east elevation, the only thing I'm asking for is that we can't use the word study anymore, so provide architectural elements to better articulate. That's what we're saying. We're not asking to, or I'm not asking to reduce or raise the plate heights.
Acceptable.
I have a clarification too on this podium wall. Apparent mass, are you talking more about height or like design elements, faux windows, or both?
I personally wouldn't ask for any kind of openings or windows like that, especially beyond the property line, so I don't know how other board members feel. To me, I think it's something you can achieve with finishes and detailing.
Finishes.
Or detailing in the finishes.
Okay.
I don't know if you guys feel the same way about that.
Yes.
Okay. Is there anything else you want to add to the motion?
Discussion.
Chair, before you vote, can we provide an applicant input or suggestion? Because we're impacted by this.
Yeah, I mean, as part of the discussion, I mean, I would just say to my fellow board members before I'll let you have a moment. I mean, this is something that the city's been under scrutiny for, and this is housing that the city needs to provide. I understand your concerns, but we have to have some, flexibility on what we're seeing here. And
I think my comments are flexible enough. I stand by the motion.
So if we didn't vote for it, what is their option for an appeal?
Well, that's not it's not for us to decide. So I have 30 seconds, please.
We have done everything asked. What the board is asking for are things that can be provided at final. The elevations, we've provided additional studies of 3D, multiple viewpoints, and photo simulations, which is above and beyond. So to get caught there and final, things that are normally for final, we would prefer that the board give us an up or down on this project. For entitlement, we are on a timeline, so we can go and we can appeal if it's a no, or we can move along with the project and bring back final things that are more appropriate for final. And entitlement is a major milestone, and the things that have been brought up for continuance of are minor items that do not relate to anything the Planning Commission has already opined on. So we'd ask for an up or down on this project. It would be my request as applicant.
I'm going to stand by the motion. I disagree with those assertions. It's a big project. These projects have been very big, and the process about letting details go to final has never worked out good for the applicants or the community. It's unfortunate. It's not how it used to be, but it's how it is. And, that's just kind of how it is now. And these elements, because the comments have been very consistent for a long time now, for over a year, to look at the height studies by multiple board members, and none of that's been addressed. So what we're trying to ask now, rather than sticking to that position and saying those comments haven't been addressed, you still have to reduce the height, or we're saying no, is saying, okay, well, now you guys got to look at your detailing, look at your finishes, look at your architectural elements, because if you're not going to work with us, like we've asked numerous times to work on the height, then the next step would be, okay, we're accepting something of what you're saying, but now we're trying to help you with detailing in some other portions, and if there's no detailing in the set, I personally am not comfortable giving PDA at that point, unfortunately, with these projects. It's a great project, there's just things that are still not defined yet. No, that's the reason why I'm making the motion.
Okay, I have one clarification for council. Planning Commission has reviewed this, provided a motion based on what we've seen here today. Can we
Yeah, I think
away from that motion?
Chairman Moore, I think you have a couple options, right? What you don't want to do, and I hear the applicant saying, is you don't want to put the applicant in purgatory, right? At the same time, you're not comfortable for tangible reasons, right? So at this point, the motion and what is requested and needed need to be at least concrete. So if they come back and one more time for PDA, that they aren't being pushed down along, kicking the can down the road. It really needs to be addressed. So you have planning commission, to answer your question, you do have planning commission's input, but again, this is your purview in terms of the aesthetics and to review this point. So if you want to make this motion to continue indefinitely, it has been done before. I do understand the applicant's concern he raises on the issue in terms of balancing it both. So the way to balance both is not to continue indefinitely, but have it, if it can be addressed, have it specific. Yeah, and if it's something that these are items we need to see in order for us to approve it, and if they are done, we will approve it, not again to surprise the applicant when they come back again before the board. That would be probably the most appropriate streamlined way to do it if you have support in this motion, and that's the whole point, to have the support in the motion, the vote, that at least there is the applicant can foresee it being approved the next time they're before this board.
But the applicant has asked for an up or down, and a down is an option, because the applicant then could appeal the down. Is that correct?
Chair Moore and Board Member Olson, that is correct. In order to give this a down vote, if that the board would need to make health and human safety findings. It's part of the Housing Accountability Act from the state of California. So you would need to clearly articulate the concerns based on health and human safety.
And do you think that the concerns have been articulated by the motion that's on the floor?
No,
I don't see any. The motion on the floor is clearly aesthetic, so it doesn't deal with health and safety.
I don't see those concerns.
Chair,
Can we finish the vote?
Sure.
Okay,
So,
so
Chair, I request that we finish the vote.
no more discussion. Okay, we had a first and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? So, 3-1. Carries. So item number 4 was canceled, is that correct? 29 South Memphis? That was scheduled for 6 p.m. And then item number 5, 720 West Pedregosa.
Right on schedule.
Scheduled for 6:25, which it is just now.
Chair Moore, I need to recuse myself from the rest of the hearing for health reasons.
Okay.
Do you want him to stay until Board Member Cunningham comes back?
If he is indeed coming back, there he is. Yeah, great. All right, come on up. You guys are up. Yep. Okay. This is a new item, concept review, 720 West Pedregosa Street. There's a proposal for a new 2-story residence, and project proposes to retain the existing residence on site, demolish the existing 1-car garage, and construct a 1,404 square foot 3-bedroom, 3-bath residence, and a 472 square foot 2-car garage. Other alterations include demolishing of a 103 square foot porch, new water meter, new gas meter, new underground utilities. A hedge on the front property line is also proposed to be trimmed. No final appealable decision will be made at this hearing. Project requires compliance with the project compatibility analysis and the following design guidelines: the urban design guidelines, infill design guidelines, and outdoor lighting design guidelines. Okay, welcome. If you could introduce yourselves.
Good evening. I'm Jose Luis Esparza. I'm the architect.
David Chavez,
I
part
could
owner.
have you
David Chavez, part owner.
Jacob Chavez, part owner.
And thank you for that introduction. I'll start with Mr. Chavez and give him a little background.
Yeah, I'm.
I just need you to really speak right into that
works
area.
better. I'm a local Santa Barbarian. My dad was an architect who worked for Delfonso years ago. So I kind of feel we've worked on the city, help build the city up. And I'd like my children to have the chance to stay here. So we are trying to I have 3 children, and I want to try to find places for them to live when I'm gone, so they can continue the Chavez name in Santa Barbara. Like I say, we go back. I don't think you want to know all my history here, but I used to come here when it was a baseball field. This room right here was very close to home plate where we're at right now. I used to chase balls and watch the Santa Barbara Dodgers play. And so we go way back. My uncle was a barber on Milpa Street for years and years, so we're well known in this town. But again, thank you for your time, and hopefully this works out.
Okay. Just a little bit of location. So we're
use the pointer that'd be.
So we're at we're in the middle of the block here, and currently here's the front of the site looking from across the street. This is the hedge that is proposed to be trimmed down. The existing garden wall is compliant. It's like 40 to 42 inches high. So then here's looking at the other down the street. We do have a 2-story on each side. So we've got the yellow house on the left side, and we have this house on the right side.
The east and west, that one's on the east end.
Yes. Here's a couple of more angles showing the 2 stories that are already existing on the block. This is looking across the street and some more 2-story buildings. I think that's a church and living quarters for the church. This is looking at the house looking to the west at the 2-story that's existing. This is the hedge between the 2 properties. And then this is a close-up of the front of the existing house. Some more close-ups of the existing front of the house. This is to the east, the building to the east, the 2-story. And these are a couple of views looking down the side with, if I can just turn and make sure I'm looking at, with this being the garage that's going to be demolished. So what we're doing is this is the existing house. So we've got the 2-story and the 2-story. This is their garage and their garage. we placed the house on the same side as the existing residence. It would have been nicer if it would worked out the other way, for the solar, because due to the solar, the second floor is set back over 10 feet. But it works out. It gives it a nice separation here, and it gives it a nice separation here. It's a shared, right now the driveway goes from here to here so that they both use the same curb cut. And we're proposing to do permeable pavers, 2-story unit with a 2-car garage for this residence, and then 2 open spaces for the existing, complying with the parking regulations. And of course, trimming down the hedge. And the hedge goes all the way back. And there's vines on this fence, and the fence is the neighbors. But there's no hedge on that side. So on the floor plan, we've got the 2-car garage, driveway coming down here. So we've got porch, wraparound porch, front entrance, slider going out towards the driveway, kitchen with window facing the street, and then side French door, sliding French door to the side yard for air and ventilation. We've tucked the washer dryer inside of the garage, and right now I'm showing the space for a water heater. It could become a water softener with the tankless outside, but just showing that there's room for that kind of option. We do have a full bath downstairs with a shower, and then upstairs we have 3 bedrooms, master, and 2 bedrooms sharing a bathroom, with a deck off of the master, and it's looking down towards the driveway. The only windows facing the neighbors are smaller windows for air and ventilation. We do have 2 small decks, 36 inches, which is the maximum that allowed to project into the front. The second story is at 20 feet setback, and we're allowed to project 3 feet, so that allows us these decks with French sliders. And again, it's looking out towards the street, so we're not. We feel we're not looking down on anybody's yard, taking away their privacy. Our 2 neighbors are craftsman style, bungalow style. So we've gone with very similar architecture. We're going to use siding with casement windows, and our detailing will be mostly wood. We've got the columns with the kickers, rounded kickers, going around, doing a little bit of symmetry around the front door, and then coming around the corner to the side door, garage door with our second story deck up here, and the 2 decks facing the street here. And we've gone with the hip roofs to minimize size, apparent size to the neighbors, and to blend into the neighborhood. We do have a trellis over the deck there. And if I'm open for questions.
Okay, great. We'll open up for public comment. Anyone here would like to speak on this project? Seeing no one, we'll close public comment and go to questions.
I have no questions.
Great.
No questions, Chair. I have a question.
Yes.
We go to the site plan.
Yep.
May I have the pointer? Thank you. Do you need this full width of the driveway from front to back, or are you simply keeping it that width to accommodate the parking in an easier fashion?
To accommodate an easier parking, we could narrow this to 12 feet. It might actually make the turn a little bit smoother. But it'd be nice to have it this width, so when they're backing up, there's less of a chance of a bottleneck.
Is the backing? Do you plan to be backing all the way out to the
No.
street, or
No.
will they be turning at this point?
They'd be turning here. I believe there's enough. I've got to put the template on here, but I believe there's enough room to do a 3-point turn there.
Okay, so 12 feet would be your minimum, and that's fire department standard?
I know that the fire department always asks for 14, but I could check to see if 12 would be the minimum that they would allow.
Okay, but you're showing 17 at this point.
I believe, 17 is the parking, 16 is the driveway. See if you can look, there's a little bit set offset.
Okay, that's all I have, thank you.
Okay. And then you're showing outdoor open space here and here.
Correct. I just split it up into two because the way to calculate it, but it's all one space.
But
And
these guys are really going to just use this up front, right?
If they choose, this is all open yard for both of them. This is about 14 feet, so they potentially have a side yard that's as big as almost as big as their front yard for private use.
Are you anticipating any landscaping in that, or just going to leave it as is?
We're going to do some landscaping, probably not a whole lot. I know that, one of the requirements when we return is a landscape plan. So it's something that we need to design and work out.
And then this is existing, right? This little
Yes.
gate, and you walk up. Great.
I do have a question.
Okay.
So the porch, is it for the existing residents?
Yes.
Is it attached to the garage of the new residents?
So we would come right up to the edge of that. They would basically be touching each other, but it's not intended to be physically attached.
And that porch is frame?
No, it's all concrete. It's all block plaster.
How far off it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 risers off the ground?
It's about 30 inches off the ground, right? There is a front elevation.
Yeah, there's a little cap on it. So it's going to be a little interesting build. If that, I think I see where you're going with that. Well, here's a good. This is what it is right here. And this is all, and there's a cap there that's going to need to go. But yeah, we're going to.
We'd be real interested in how that is going to.
Yeah, we'll
work.
need a detail on that.
And we're going to be cutting it short to provide, because right now the stairs go straight out to the street, so we'd be doing, putting the stairs off to the side.
Okay, comments?
No further comments.
I think the site plan with respect to landscaping and usability of open area, because now you've essentially created a duplex and it's multiple housing. So I think thinking a little bit better of how the site will work for your children or future inhabitants, I think would be better suited or to explore that a little bit more. My comment.
Yeah, it's a little disconcerting that you've got so much open space that will essentially be serving the existing residents and so little to serve the proposed. even though the agreement may be that, these folks have the option to use that, kind of feels like they're going into the private space of the other residents. I'm not really sure whether that's resolvable without maybe just considering how this is designed to possibly leave some space between it and the existing residents for usable open space. I'm not sure if the way it's designed is a deal breaker for me, though, but I would kind of like for you to think about how you might be able to accommodate more private open space for the new residents. I'm also interested in knowing whether or not you've got any existing street trees along the frontage. Do you know?
No, we don't have any.
Okay.
There was one where the approach was, and then it got moved. When you say in front of this property, there's no street trees.
Okay.
There's one that was planted next.
So is this all open parkway along?
Yes.
Okay. I would, again, I'd like to see a better utilization of, better distribution of open space. I guess I would just like to ask you to
You can say study at this
study
point.
that. And I think the driveway needs to be reduced to the minimum that you can get with fire department approval. And please contact the Parks Division and find out what the designated street tree is and include that on your drawings next time. Thank you.
I think conceptually it's a fine project. I think it works well. It's not too tall. It's not overbearing on the neighbors. I think the architecture is certainly fine. I agree that I think if you could give this house a little bit more breathing room on this side, so if you could pull this edge back and get a little bit of a buffer so people aren't driving right by your house, I think that'd be great. And that'll also give you the chance to plant that a little bit, get you a little bit more privacy. I mean, for a situation like this, I understand the other board member's point about this being kind of a larger area, and people aren't really going to go back there from the front. They're really just going to use this as going to be their yard up front, and I think that's fine. It's just the way it is.
They'll have a lot of driveway too.
So, I think conceptually it's working okay.
I'd like to add a comment to support, as you have said, the concept of this, and that I will be an advocate for this project. Thank you.
I think the architecture is quite nice. It'll fit right into the neighborhood.
Yeah, I like it too.
Thank you.
Okay, so I'll make a motion that for continuance back to full board, and I'm assuming it needs to go through and check for.
Correct. Is it my understanding that the board feels this is near enough to project design approval to warrant the full routing process? Okay, then yes, so it would need to be an indefinite continuance.
So an indefinite continuance back to the full board. The board is in support of the proposed design as presented. The architecture is acceptable and will fit in nicely with the neighborhood. The board would like the applicant to reduce the width of the driveway to the greatest extent possible and provide as much landscapable area between the driveway and the proposed residence, and to contact the Parks Department and determine what street tree is appropriate, and to determine if one could be planted in the parkway. And the board is looking forward to the applicant to return with everything that's required to make project compatibility analysis.
Second the motion.
Any other discussion?
Mr. Chair, may I read that back?
Yes, please.
So we have an indefinite continuance back to the full board. The board is in support of the proposed design as presented. The architecture is acceptable and will fit in nicely with the neighborhood. Reduce the width of the driveway to the greatest extent possible. Provide as much planting area between the proposed driveway and the residence. Contact Parks to determine what street tree is appropriate to plant in the parkway, if any. Did you say if any?
Mm-hmm.
Yes. And board is looking forward for the applicant to return with everything required to make the project compatibility analysis.
First and a second, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
All right, and with that, we will conclude our meeting for the November 4th agenda of ABR. Thank you very much.